Fry Starlight's POV. Aegon Valyrian, the prince had surpassed my expectations by miles. Though I thought I knew him, what he revealed just now proved the extent of my ignorance. Dragoth, the human demon, a monster of SS plus rank, nothing but a mere plaything in his hands. He had forged his own demonic contract, twisted Dragoth's power into his own, exploiting the Empire, and even exploiting me to finish the job of killing him. What happened didn't just grant Aegon the strength he sought, it also gave him the means to spy on the Ultras in a way no one would ever suspect. The prince before me, though lacking in raw might, had proven himself a master of long-reaching manipulation, capable of weaving schemes whose effects spanned years. Even now, cornered here with only me and Snow, he stood there utterly calm, as though the situation meant nothing to him. Aegon Valyrian is an unpredictable variable, a schemer on the same tier as the engineer himself. From that perspective, he was no lesser than such monsters. 19 years old, yet wielding the cunning of beings who had lived for centuries. Keeping him alive any longer will lead only to catastrophe. He hid his cards with terrifying precision. I only uncovered the matter of Dragoth because he chose to reveal it to me. If he had decided otherwise, perhaps I would never have realized. And who's to say this was the only secret he had buried? There might be countless others, infernal plans waiting for the right moment to unfold. I couldn't afford to let him roam freely any longer. The enemies were many, their power ever growing. I could not fight with such a serpent slithering behind my back, waiting for the perfect moment to sink its fangs into my throat. Here and now, I must kill him. The very moment I resolved myself, the pressure in the air shifted like magic. Both Snow and Aegon's eyes rolled instinctively toward me. "Hold your hand, Fry. This isn't the time nor the place for this," Aegon said with a strained laugh, his smile carrying a nervous edge as he stepped back. "Do you truly believe that?" I say, "There's no better chance than now," I replied, already prepared to move. Snow wavered, uncertain, but he would not stand in my way, which meant I could strike Aegon directly and end him here. Know this. If you try, you'll spell the Empire's end in this war. Believe it or not, but my mere presence alone keeps at bay horrors you cannot even imagine. Like domino pieces toppling one after another, I may be a small stone, but my fall will collapse far greater things. Think carefully before you take your next step. Fry, Aegon said, wagering everything on my hesitation. So what will it be? Do we fight here, or move on as if nothing happened? I'll take the gamble. I don't think killing you will make my situation any worse than it already is, Aegon, I said with a gentle smile, as my foot slammed the ground. I lunged. My blade tore through the air, aiming straight for his neck. At the last instant before his head could fly, Aegon unleashed a massive surge of that stolen black lightning, meeting my sword with his own. Valyrian's edge cut deep, slicing into a portion of his neck, barely sparing him from death. He stumbled back, clutching the bloody wound with his free hand. That smile of his returned, but it wasn't his usual mask of confidence. No, this one was different, an anxious smile, a smile that hinted at some kind of anticipation. Perhaps Aegon simply didn't know how to show fear. Even if he was terrified, trembling within, all his face would ever display was that filthy grin. Fry, are you seriously doing this now? Snow barked. Yes, leaving him alive will bring nothing but disaster. Snow looked torn. He too had seen the prince as someone who needed to be kept in check. But killing him here didn't feel right to him. That didn't matter. I had to finish it before Snow could interfere. True, Aegon's strength grew significantly with the lightning he stole from Dragoth. But such power meant nothing to me. My next strike would end him. A strike where I'd pour my full might into one blow, enough to sever his neck and kill him once and for all. Through my eyes, I could see dozens of paths to his death in the battle ahead. He wasn't my equal, and yet I knew that wasn't the truth. Aegon Valyrian, schemers like him never cast themselves into danger unless they had at least one way out. That was certain. which was why I pressed him to the edge, forced him to show whatever secret card he had hidden in his sleeve. Show me, Aegon. What are you really? What are you hiding? What power stands behind you? I knew his fall would trigger calamities, but I was already a cursed man, doomed to fight beings beyond comprehension since long ago. What difference would more curses make? My blade's aura of darkness surged, overwhelming his black lightning with ease. Face to face with Aegon, I was seconds away from tearing him apart. And all the while I waited for whatever trick the prince would unleash to survive. Would it be some alien power? A forbidden weapon? Something far worse? What are you hiding, Aegon? Show me your truth. Show me your true color. I had imagined many possibilities, countless scenarios, but in the end, Aegon revealed none of them. No great weapon, no new power. And yet, even without any of that, my sword froze before his neck at the last possible instant. And for the first time in a while, a shock I couldn't quite name carved itself across my face. Snow stood off to the side, bewildered at how things had just ended. Only a second ago, he was certain he'd see Aegon's head separated from his body, but that scene never came. Did he? Stop, Snow asked, confused. It wasn't Aegon who halted me. It was I who froze before him of my own will, not forced but choosing. Cold sweat rolled heavily down Aegon's back as he stumbled away, clutching his half-slashed throat and sighing in relief. That was close. Holding the wound to staunch the bleeding, he collapsed onto the ground. I meanwhile stood unmoving, staring at him. My mind was in chaos, barely able to process what had just happened. The reason I stopped wasn't due to some power restraining me. It was because of something far simpler. Words. Words that Aegon had shaped with his lips at the last instant. He knew I could perceive even the slightest things, so he mouthed them silently, leaving me the only one who could notice. And those words, just one word, were enough to paralyze me, to keep me from cutting him down. A single word. Just one. Aegon. How the hell do you know that name? I demanded, staring at him with new light in my eyes. The prince chuckled softly, spitting blood from his mouth. Kill me, Fry. Who knows? Maybe then you'll learn the answer to your question. Our cold gazes clashed. I found myself torn, unable to move forward. With a single word, that damned prince had flipped the board. He had spoken a name I never expected to hear again. At the very last moment, he mouthed it. No sound. And yet, I heard it as clearly as if he'd whispered into my ear. It was my name, the true name I had abandoned long ago, the name I left behind when I became Fry Starlight, a name lost for centuries, a name only the Demon King himself had ever spoken. And now, by some impossible means, the prince had spoken it. Just uttering it was enough to freeze me, my thoughts assaulted by a storm of questions. Does he know I'm a reincarnator? So, how could he possibly know? Is the one before me truly just a human prince not yet 20 years of age? Or something else entirely? Taking advantage of my hesitation, Aegon pressed on, still gripping his bleeding throat. We're on the same side, Fry. You have your secrets, and I have mine. But in the end, we're fighting on the same front in this war. Perhaps we're destined to clash. But isn't that the game you and I have always played? You can try to kill me, or you can keep me alive and draw the answers from me. The choice is yours. His words were spoken lightly, as if they mattered little. But I alone heard the true weight behind them. Revealing my true name was no accident. It was proof that someone stood behind him. Someone who knew what I truly was. How much do they know? And who, exactly, is that entity? I could kill Aegon now and maybe find out. But Aegon knew I couldn't. Because even I have my limits. If something powerful enough to uncover my secret truly stands behind him, then I cannot confront it with my current strength. Could be an overwhelming monster, or something far simpler. But I had no answer, which meant I could not risk killing him here. With a single word, he secured his survival. I see now. I underestimated you greatly. Whether he gained this leverage through his own skill or mere luck, it didn't matter. What mattered was that the prince had already stepped far outside the box I had placed him in. His boundaries were no longer clear to me. This world is vast, Fry. We are but tiny fragments drifting in the sea of existence. Each of us tries to play, to survive, to carve our fate with our own hands, Agon said, staring up at the sky. You're tampering with forces you cannot withstand, nor even comprehend. I shot back coldly. He shook his head. That doesn't matter. As long as they serve their purpose, it's enough. So long as I'm the one who wins in the end, nothing else matters. We fight on the same side in this war. If it can be helped, I've no desire to be your enemy, Fry. Let me prove my good faith. With a wide smile, Aegon chose his next words with surgical care. When this war ends, I promise you, I'll tell you where I learned that name. What do you say? Out of nowhere, Aegon offered me a promise I never expected. And truth be told, I had already been considering ways to force the truth out of him. But he preempted me, handing me the means himself. I know words alone won't be enough. If you demand it, I'll bind myself to an aura contract. I'll give you what you want. In return, let's fight this war side by side. Aegon Valyrian seemed desperate to keep me on his flank, at least for the duration of this war. Perhaps that was what he had been aiming for all along. From the moment he came with me to this island, perhaps it had all been part of his plan. I thought I had cornered him by dragging him here, isolated and alone. But the truth was the reverse. From the very start, he had played me flawlessly. Couldn't kill him. I couldn't force him to speak. Even torture would yield nothing. He left me no choice but to do exactly what he wanted. I had lost utterly against him. For this time, the battle wasn't fought on the field. It had already been decided long before. Some battles aren't won by the sword, and this was one of them, the preferred battlefield of Prince Aegon Valyrian. That night, before Snow's bewildered eyes, he who stood as a witness unable to understand what he was seeing, I struck a pact with the prince, resolving that from this moment forward, we would fight the war together. On the other side of the world, specifically, in the Blood Cities under Ultra's control, the demon worshippers were busy reorganizing and putting the final touches in place to plunge once again into the depths of war. The situation for the Ultras was far better than that of the Empire. They had successfully repelled the Church's offensive and limited the damage from that attack. And with the Imperial army suffering such heavy losses, now was the most opportune time to strike. In the capital, Caelid, within the fortress of Lord Gavid Lindemann, the Lord sat in the company of Murgo, who remained by his side most of the time. Both had sustained severe injuries from their last battles, first against the War Angel, and before that against Fry and the others. Thus, they had withdrawn from the chaos of war to recover. Sitting bare-chested, his upper body wrapped in bandages, Gavid stared blankly into space, drowning in his own thoughts. You've been spacing out a lot lately, my friend. Is old age finally catching up to you? Murgo's voice cut in, mocking him as usual. With a weary sigh, Lindemann answered, I was thinking about what we lost in the last battle, and what we gained. You mean Dragoth? Murgo asked, to which Gavid nodded. After all the effort we put into freeing him, he died so easily to a mere youth from the new generation. You mean Fry Starlight? He's no mere youth. He's a fully grown monster, Murgo replied, closing his eyes, remembering his clash with that young man. I know, but I can't help feeling regret. Dragoth was the people's hero. I grew up my whole life walking in his shadow. And now, to see him end in such a pitiful way, only to be replaced immediately by the 18th seat demon. You mean Beleth? Gavid nodded again. More and more high-ranking demons are flowing into our ranks, yet our heroes are gone. You and I are the last SS Plus warriors left on this side. Murgo shook his head. There's still the new generation, and that prodigy you raised yourself. Ah, V. At the mention of his name, both men turned their eyes toward the same direction. In a separate chamber, visible through a thin glass barrier, that youth could be seen slumped against a filthy wall, the ground around him littered in disarray. His body was exhausted, and 2 swords lay buried in the floor at his sides. V is strong, but his power is unstable. We don't fully understand how his copying ability works. I've been pushing him hard lately, forcing him to try replicating Fry Starlight. It gave him overwhelming strength. But the results are lying there in front of you. Gavid rose from his seat and approached the glass. His ability lets him mimic the techniques and combat styles of those he copies, even their skills, but he cannot replicate unique abilities or elemental powers. In other words, he makes do with what he already has to compensate. Fry Starlight possessed an SSS tier aura reserve, something V did not. To make up for it, V substituted with the dark flames drawn from his demonic contract. That substitution allowed him to endure. He can mimic Fry Starlight's strongest techniques, but in V's hands they are far weaker. I saw the difference clearly in our last battle against him. The gap between them is like night and day, said Gavid, and Murgo nodded in agreement. So you're saying he'll never defeat the original, is that it? Not through copying alone, no. That much is certain. But that's not the way I intend for him to fight, Lindemann replied, his thoughts spilling out. V had always been his student, his creation, his masterpiece to shape as he wished. I don't know the exact conditions or limits of his ability, but my plan is to have him copy as many combat styles and techniques as possible, building an arsenal of endless weapons at his disposal. That way, he may never beat Fry Starlight through imitation alone, but he could compensate with sheer versatility. This was the vision Gavid placed his hopes on, his most talented disciple, forged into the ultimate weapon. You want to turn him into a killing machine that masters countless styles? Is that even possible? Murgo asked, his eyes flicking toward the discarded swords on the floor. Firstly, V could only wield 2 legendary swords when in Fry Starlight's form. Once he dropped the imitation, his body collapsed the moment he tried using both. Murgo never understood why. That mystery lay with Fry himself. Secondly, there was no proof V could copy more than one person at a time, nor any clear understanding of his limits or conditions. Thirdly, even when the copying succeeded, V was still weaker than the likes of Fry. The ability was powerful, yes, but riddled with shortcomings. From Murgo's perspective, Gavid was blinded, perhaps even obsessed. But in the eyes of Ultra's Lord, V was their last hope. And he had staked everything on him. That's not the right way to fight, Gavid. One man alone will never change anything, Murgo said, frowning before turning to leave. Raw, overwhelming power is all that matters in this world. A single man with enough strength can achieve what thousands cannot. I thought you, of all people, understood that. Murgo. The words were true enough, yet Murgo simply did not see that potential in V. Let's just hope your precious prodigy doesn't shatter before becoming what you want him to be. With that, Murgo turned and walked away. Where do you think you're going? Gavid shouted after him. Murgo waved him off with a hand. You have your way of fighting, Gavid, and I have mine. Let's both do our best to save our kind before it's too late. With those words, Murgo vanished before him, leaving Gavid alone with V. The Lord of the Ultras had placed much on the young man's shoulders, trying to forge him into a monster that could be relied upon against the countless other monsters threatening their existence. Meanwhile, as the Ultras were preparing for war, a single man had already crossed the entire Demon Sea by himself, returning to the empire he had once left behind for the sake of battle. Mikar Valyrian. He descended out of nothingness into the skies above Belgrade, shaking the heavens with relentless thunder. Within minutes, he annihilated wave after wave of war angels. None who stood in his way were spared as he cut straight toward his imperial fortress. But upon reaching the place where he had spent most of his life, Mikar found only ruin. The flames of purification had reduced the once mighty castle to ash, slaughtering everyone within. He didn't care. With his nerves taut and his face darkened by deep anxiety, Mikar rushed toward a specific part of the fortress, blasting aside rubble as he carved a tunnel through the earth with his explosive might. No, it's fine. There's no way they could have found this place, the Emperor muttered under his breath, though worry still tightened his expression. The chamber he sought lay deep underground, where no fire could reach. That was the reason Mikar had hidden his greatest treasure there. And sure enough, within seconds, he broke through to the secret tunnels beneath the fortress. The Valyrian estate was laced with underground passages, used in times of emergency as shelters. Mikar sensed many people within them now, likely members of his family who had fled and by sheer luck survived. At first, he grew tense, fearing they might have stumbled upon his hidden chamber. But the passage they had taken was entirely separate, and the magical traps he had placed remained dormant. Relief washed over him when he saw the outer chamber untouched. Still, he refused to take chances. Pressing forward, Mikar reached the door and forced it open. The frozen chamber. The quiet, icy room he had retreated to whenever life became too much. The place where he had hidden his weapons, his tools, and, most importantly, the body of the one he had been obsessed with for so long. As the door swung open, Mikar's eyes met a sight that shattered his expression entirely. Everything was as it had always been, cold, silent, untouched, except for one thing that broke him. With heavy steps, he walked inside, staring directly at the object at the heart of the chamber. The coffin. The frozen coffin was destroyed, smashed open by foreign hands. Its contents were gone. "It's not here. It's gone," Mikar whispered, his face twisting into something monstrous. His greatest fear had come to pass. Someone had broken into this place, ignored the weapons, ignored the treasures, and taken only the corpse. Rage boiling in his chest, Mikar's golden eyes burned as he turned toward the faint presence of survivors hiding behind distant walls. Was it them? Had one of them discovered his secret? Clenching his fists, the Emperor surged forward, his heart trembling with fury. Whoever it was, they won't live to see tomorrow. He swore it, unleashing explosions in his wake as he hunted for the thief who had stolen what he valued above all else. The Holy Island, Sicily, the stronghold of the followers of the Lord of Light, supposedly their blessed paradise. And yet, somehow it lay empty. Upon that land, cut off from the rest of the world, 3 men wandered alone among the corpses of both angels and humans alike. Hours had passed since their arrival, yet Fry and his companions found no trace of Joseph Blatier, the one they had come searching for, nor of Uriel Platini, who was supposed to be nearby. As they scoured shrines and churches scattered across the island, silence hung heavy between them. The reason was simple: what had transpired earlier between Fry and the prince. Snow Lionheart, using his sword, searched for clues that might lead them to unravel the mystery at hand. But even the Vermithor offered him no direction. Meanwhile, Fry released his full aura, expanding it to envelop the entire island in search of answers of his own. The sheer magnitude of energy radiating from his body sent chills down Snow's spine, even after all he had been through. "Even though my strength has grown tremendously thanks to the demonic path, I still can't perceive him," Snow sighed as he approached Fry. The latter opened his eyes the moment his friend neared. "Ah, sorry. Did I interrupt you?" Snow asked apologetically, but Fry shook his head. "Not at all. I was simply growing tired of searching for clues in this wretched place." He exhaled, scanning the ruined sanctuaries before them. "It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, except in our case, it's a whole island of hay." Despite pushing his senses to the very limit, despite casting his aura over every inch of this land, Fry could not detect a single trace of the church's followers. It was as though they had vanished from the world entirely. "We had planned to strike swiftly and retreat, using the element of surprise. But that chance is gone," Snow said, seating himself beside Fry on the roof of one of the island's grander shrines. "After the angelic assault earlier, it's all but certain they know we're here, meaning that even if we do find them, they'll be ready for us." Fry nodded grimly. It was the obvious conclusion. "There's something ominous about this island, something foreboding," Fry muttered, recalling the sacrificed saint he had witnessed. "They're sacrificing their own to grasp at greater power. They went so far as to slaughter an awakened of rank SS+. I can no longer make sense of what the church is trying to achieve. He was sincere. Even the novel he had once written offered him no clues now. In his original story, the church had been little more than a nuisance, a force Snow was meant to dispatch without much difficulty. But this church, the real one, was nothing like that. Fry had abandoned all thought of relying on the novel he once authored. He no longer saw himself as the creator of this world at all. Aegon said, "There's some riddle we must solve if we hope to find Plottier," Snow said, his gaze drifting toward the prince, who wandered some distance away, conducting his own search in his own peculiar way. Snow's expression grew complicated, clouded with suspicion. Fry noticed it immediately. "Sorry, I suppose what happened earlier left you unsettled." "Well, I'd be lying if I said it didn't." Leaning back, Snow replayed the scene in his mind. "First you tried to kill him, and I could clearly tell you were serious. The killing intent radiating from you wasn't something anyone could mistake. But then, at the very last moment, you stopped. It was as if something held you back, something that made you strike a deal with Aegon instead." From Snow's perspective, watching from the sidelines, he hadn't been able to catch what Aegon had whispered. He had no way of knowing the true reason Fry stayed his hand. To him, it looked like some strange power had frozen Fry in place. And then, bafflingly, Fry had entered into some kind of agreement with the prince immediately afterward. Snow couldn't make sense of it. So, for now, he chose to focus on the matter at hand, setting the enigma of Aegon aside. "Tell me, Snow, what do you think is the best way to deal with Aegon?" Fry asked, his voice calm but edged with weight. Snow remained silent for a few seconds, pondering before answering. "Honestly, I think following a man like that will only lead to disaster. I don't believe in the shallow notions of good and evil, so I won't say Aegon is simply evil and must be killed. But without question, he's someone who deserves punishment, and someone we must be wary of." He recalled everything Aegon had revealed, most of all, his use of Dragoth in his schemes. That revelation had shaken him. And yet, he didn't believe Aegon deserved death. For all his disdain for the prince, Snow acknowledged his cunning. Aegon Valyrian was capable of much, and if he was on their side, he could be a devastating weapon in this war, tilting the scales against any foe. That was why Snow hadn't supported Fry when he attempted to kill him, but he hadn't intervened to stop him either. In other words, he chose neutrality in the matter. As long as Aegon fought on their side, Snow would let him live, though he must face consequences. Whatever form that punishment took, it wouldn't extend to execution. Fry, listening, nodded slowly. "Your reasoning isn't wrong, but it isn't right either." His eyes hardened as he stared toward where Aegon wandered. Aegon Valyrian could be a tremendous asset in this war. But there's no guarantee he'll always be on our side. He only ever acts for his own gain. He's an unpredictable variable. One better off dead before he can keep playing the game. Fry chuckled bitterly, spreading his arms. "But as you can see, killing him has become difficult. That bastard utterly defeated me." He laughed again, standing up from where he sat. The truth was simple. The thought of Aegon consumed him. It hadn't left his mind once in the hours since their clash. For now, he had accepted Aegon's offer. He had agreed to fight alongside him. But it was compulsion, not choice. Killing Aegon now could lead to disasters beyond reckoning. At worst, it might draw out the being who had gifted Aegon his true name. At best, perhaps Aegon had obtained it by some other means. For example, just like the Mist Stalker did in the past, when it used his memories against him. Perhaps the prince possessed a method or an artifact that allowed him to read minds, but that possibility was slim. Either way, the risk was too great. Between the risk of killing Aegon and provoking whatever he was hiding, or going with the flow and waiting, Fry chose the latter. It was vexing. His enemies had begun to multiply far too much lately. The Ultras, the high demons that had recently appeared, the church, shrouded in mystery, and now Aegon, with whatever secrets he concealed. It felt as if Fry was now cornered from all sides. Even the Empire's side could no longer be trusted because of the prince. Let's move, Fry said before leaping down from the top of the mausoleum, with Snow following right after him. To where? Where do you think? To the place where the church's bastards are hiding, Fry replied, his gaze fixed on that waterfall which split the heavens and descended to nourish this land with blessings. When I once covered this island with my aura, I could sense every little thing happening here. Nothing could escape my eyes. But that waterfall was the exception. No matter how I tried to pierce it with my aura, it was as if some force repelled me. You know what that means, don't you? Fry asked while Snow grasped the implication. That waterfall is the key. Most likely, with Frey's SSS-class aura and heightened senses, finding the path wasn't difficult. Chances are, the church never expected to face someone like me. After all, no human alive was known to possess an SSS-class aura. The church would never have imagined that Fry was the exception. Let's drag that damned prince and head to the waterfall. It's time to solve this mystery. And so, the three of them found the first clue leading to the place they had been seeking. It took only a few minutes for Fry and Snow to regroup with Aegon, and together they made their way toward the waterfall. As they approached, the three were awestruck by the bizarre sight, a waterfall descending straight from the heavens. This is definitely not something man-made, Snow said, and Fry agreed. You're probably right. Aegon was the first to advance, placing his hand upon the waterfall, attempting to push through. Yet his hand halted before crossing to the other side. These are no ordinary waters. They are brimming with divine power. They appeared like ordinary water, but the truth was vastly different from what the eye perceived. The moment Fry and Snow approached, they both realized the prince had spoken the truth. The amount of holy energy those waters emitted was immense. So immense that it surpassed even what Snow's sacred blade Vermithor had unleashed. This is incredible. It looks like a normal waterfall at first glance, but in truth, it's a current of divine energy so dense that it has taken the form of water, the prince said, delighted with his discovery. That would explain why this island overflows with such pure aura. The holy island of Sicilia was described as a paradise on earth, blessed with endless riches and abundance. No place was more sanctified than this, and the reason was none other than the waterfall itself, which nourished and healed the land endlessly with its divine energy. This realization made them all ponder the same question. Where in the hell is all this holy power coming from? A waterfall that poured out aura ceaselessly for years. What was its true source? And what kind of aura was this, never once depleted over all these years? The answer was a riddle that baffled them, but solving it wasn't their priority. At the same time, all three tried to cross the waterfall, but the waters were like a wall, denying passage. Looks like we're in the right place, Aegon said with a smile, while Fry drew the Dark Sister. This waterfall is more like a barrier, or to be precise, a gate. It conceals whatever lies on the other side. They could have simply gone around it, but the waterfall wasn't hiding what lay behind. It concealed something entirely different. There must be some mechanism to pass through, Aegon said, pointing out the obvious. That's true, but we don't have time to figure out that mechanism. Gathering dark aura around his blade and amplifying it with the Dark Sister, Fry readied himself to strike. It'll be easier to carve open the path by force. Channeling his sword, Fry intended to tear the way open himself, letting the aura of darkness invade the waterfall. Aiming at the waterfall of holy power, darkness welled from Fry Starlight's blade. With a sweep of his sword, he unleashed a colossal cleave that soared hundreds of meters, banking on shaking the waterfall apart. Frey's full-force strike scattered the holy aura waters in all directions, and the ground quaked violently. The attack was overwhelming. Neither Snow nor Aegon could have done any better. An attack like that should have been enough not just to split the waterfall, but to obliterate it entirely, yet none of that came to pass. True, Dark Sister's blow sent turbulent ripples coursing across the surface of the waterfall of holy power, but it soon resumed its flow as if nothing had happened, swallowing Frey's starlight whole. Stunned, Fry stared at his sword, then back at the falls in turn. I wasn't playing around here. Did that thing actually block my strike? The waterfall hadn't seemed man-made, but Fry had never once expected that a blow carrying his full might wouldn't even make it tremble. What now? Am I supposed to hit it with nameless judgment or something? Fry scowled, seriously considering erasing the waterfall with the strongest weapon in his arsenal. But Aegon stepped in to stop him. This isn't the right way to handle it, Fry. This is supposed to be a door, a magical pass-through. To pass, we need a key. Otherwise, even if you destroy it, that won't open the way. In other words, Fry might manage to destroy the falls with his strongest strike, but all that would accomplish was destroying the path, not opening it. So you're saying we're forced to hunt for the key now, after finally finding the door? That's how it is. Having found the passage, they were back to square one, until Aegon pointed out something else that changed the equation. If our assumption is right, the church's entire force is on the other side, which likely means the method of entry is simpler than it looks. Maybe you only need to belong to the church. Aegon spoke and Fry answered at once. Or carry something that ties you to it. At that moment, both of them turned toward Snow Lionheart. Snow traded looks with them for a few seconds, raising a brow. What? He asked, then realized what they meant. Ah, I see. Snow extended his hand, revealing the sacred blade, Vermithor. If what it takes is proof of one's bond to the church to enter, I doubt there's anything better than Vermithor, the holy sword granted by the Lord of Light himself. What lent even more weight to the theory was the strange glow that rippled across the waterfall's surface in response to Vermithor, proving it was the key. So, do I just stick my sword into the falls like a key? Or what? There wasn't any keyhole to begin with, so that didn't seem like the answer. Just release some of the blade's holy power into the waterfall. I think that'll do it, Aegon said, and Snow nodded, stepping forward. Let's try it, then. Holding his sword before the falls, Snow poured a considerable amount of holy power into it, and the instant he did, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the waterfall's surface shuddered. Immediate effect. The response was instantaneous, and a passage opened within the waterfall. A strange gateway formed entirely of holy power. Oddly, the passage pierced the very void, carving a path that broke space and time. It didn't lead to the other side of the waterfall at all, but to somewhere else entirely. The church really was hiding a lot, Aegon murmured, as Snow turned to him, Fry at his side. Stay close to me when we go in. This place seems to reject anyone who doesn't carry the key. Following him, Fry and Aegon kept near Snow as the three of them stepped onto the road shaped by holy power. The path trembled as they went, holy tendrils creeping across the ground and through the walls toward Fry and Aegon, only to calm the moment they neared Snow. They seemed especially agitated toward Aegon. He drew the fiercest resistance. This tunnel can pinpoint impurity with precision. No wonder it's drawn to you, Fry said to the prince, who chuckled lightly. Don't forget you're getting your fair share of attention too. Aegon wasn't wrong. Fry drew some resistance as well, but it was paltry compared to what Aegon faced. Whatever the prince was hiding, it clearly wasn't in harmony with holy power. Demonic aura, maybe? Fry wondered, keeping his eye on the prince the entire time. Holy power springs from the bearers of light, the antithesis of demons. In other words, demonic aura is exactly what would send holy power into such agitation. That gave Fry a few hints, though for now they were only wild inferences. The entity backing Aegon might be a demon. The possibility was there, and Fry connected the dots. The prince had never left his thoughts, not even now, when the three of them were about to clash with the church. Fry kept prioritizing him above everything else. As they walked upon the luminous ground of holy power, time itself seemed to slow around Fry while he pondered the prince's truth. If the entity behind Aegon is a demon, it would be one of immense power, one whose abilities could reveal my secret. Aegon had spoken his name, his true name from his previous life. And the only demon who had ever uttered that name was the Demon King, Agaroth himself. The latter possesses an eye that can behold fate itself. He can discern the past, the present, and the future of those he gazes upon. This is the King's Eye, a world-breaking power that toys with fate itself. Beside Agaroth, there is another demon who wields the very same ability. The demon whose name had been circling around Fry of late, the one the engineer warned him about. Perhaps it was the very entity that whispered into Aegon's ear and told him his name, the malign being that whispers to all humankind and manipulates them from behind the curtain. Connecting the dots, Fry drew close to a conclusion. He had no proof, nothing to guarantee his thoughts were right, but this was the most logical inference he could reach. The demon backing Aegon, the one who gave him my name, and perhaps other weapons hidden up his sleeve. The fourth seat, Westgear. The moment this possibility surfaced in his mind, Frey's eyes gradually darkened, as he smothered the killing intent gnawing at his heart. I'll watch a little longer. Staring at Aegon's back, Fry wore a thoroughly frightening expression. I'll let him play it his way, then finish it my way. From the beginning, Fry had made Aegon swear to tell him the truth once the war ended. An aura contract the prince entered. Likewise, Fry had entered an aura contract stating he would fight in this war at Aegon's side and would do him no harm. But what Aegon didn't know was that aura contracts no longer worked on Fry at all. The first time I entered an aura contract was 3 years ago, right after my reincarnation. Back then, he made it with Ada. Since that time, Shadow Attunement had already grasped the inner workings of that contract. And now, after Fry opened the third stage of Shadow Attunement, the stage that let him manipulate aura with absolute freedom, he had become capable of nullifying the inevitability bound to aura contracts. In other words, I can kill him. Fry played obedient, presenting himself as utterly beaten from the moment Aegon spoke his true name. He let the prince believe he had won completely, that Fry would pose no threat. No human in recorded history had ever been able to annul an aura contract. In other words, Aegon Valyrian truly believed he was safe now. I've been dancing to others' tunes for far too long. Countless entities have toyed with me, trying to make me do their bidding. It was the curse of Frey's life. Aegon Valyrian was attempting the same, manipulating him and leading him into a trap. But things were no longer the same. I'm not the naive fool you can push around so easily anymore. As the three of them walked within the tunnel of holy power, Fry quietly wove his counterplan, deliberately keeping his head lowered. Enjoy your victory, Aegon, and the false safety you crafted for yourself. Keep walking just like that, and ready your neck, because you won't know when you'll lose it. Mastering himself and the killing intent within him, Fry steadied his breath and schooled his body and features with meticulous control, hiding his true intent. Thus, Fry and his companions finally reached the tunnel's end, setting foot for the first time in the land where their enemies had hidden. The land erased from the history books, the safe haven of the Lord of Light's followers. Nocthera, the lost city swallowed by eternal night. It took Fry and his companions only a handful of minutes to finally reach the other side. Following Snow, who led the way bearing Vermithor, they crossed without trouble, and within moments the three of them were left breathless by the sight before them. Nocthera, the land of eternal night. A vast, boundless expanse where darkness reigned without end. Gazing up, they couldn't tear their eyes from the glittering stars studding the sky. So many they seemed like jewels and lamps lighting the world out of shadow. Among them, a colossal moon looked down, adorning the heavens with its brilliant glow. The moon was so near it covered a vast swath of the sky by itself. The atmosphere felt utterly otherworldly. Who would have thought the church was hiding something like this? Aegon said, taking in the lay of the land. Before them stretched a sprawling forest, its trees carrying leaves that glowed with a faint green light, gently revealing the path. The place was pure enchantment. So much so that all three felt as though they were no longer on Earth, but had set foot into an entirely different world. Where are we exactly? Snow asked the obvious question, for this was no longer the holy island of Sicilia. It's as if we were transported to another world altogether. That was how it seemed to Snow as he scanned their surroundings. But Fry, who had closed his eyes for a heartbeat, disagreed. No, this isn't another world. We're still on Earth. He opened his eyes, violet light kindling within them, and spread his aura outward. He had already uncovered the land's secret. To be precise, we're still on the holy island of Sicilia. We never left it. At those words, Aegon and Snow both turned toward him. It didn't sound logical. Explain, Fry. How can this be the same island? They had teleported through the passage the waterfall had formed, and nothing around them felt familiar. But Fry had found the key. In the first place, his teleportation ability that brought them to the island had been configured to take them straight to Uriel Platini. In other words, even if some force interfered with the transfer, they should have ended up near him. And since Uriel Platini was, in all likelihood, here in Nocthera, Fry reached a strange conclusion after attempting to sweep the area with his aura. We're still on the holy island of Sicilia, but, pointing upward, he told them the truth. We're above it, specifically above the island. This place sits in its sky, and if I'm not mistaken, the waterfall rich with holy power originates from here. Frey's words finally allowed Snow and Aegon to grasp one of the church's secrets. So we're standing on land built in the sky? Aegon laughed, staring into the darkness overhead. This doesn't look like a sky to me. We're literally in space. A strange island, floating alone in the void, an immense distance above the ground below. It was a phenomenon beyond anything they knew. How could this land stay aloft in space without falling? And how were they even breathing here? However they looked at it, this place was not the work of human hands, but it certainly brimmed with a terrifying saturation of aura. More even than the holy island lying beneath them. Fry and the others were still lost in the wonder of it when a voice, from no discernible source, snapped them from their trance and dragged them back to reality. My children, my brothers, and my companions in this dark world. The shadows of our enemies have deepened, and now they strive to defile our land. The man's voice was so loud it was heard everywhere. Fry and his companions could not pinpoint its origin, but they recognized the speaker with ease. Blatier, the high bishop of the church, the very man they had come to find. He continued, addressing others unseen. The night is long and filled with darkness, but rejoice, beloved ones, for the Lord has spoken to me at last and illuminated my path, and I now bear his light to you. Joseph Blatier went on, his tone strange, like a self-styled messenger delivering a heavenly decree. The Lord of Light is still with us. He has granted us the power to conquer all our enemies. The unclean who dared deny the Lord of Light's authority and reject his existence now stand among us, and they have grown so bold as to set their filthy feet upon our sacred ground, seeking to defile us with their evil and their shadows. At that final part of Blatier's address, the faces of Fry and Snow darkened. Fry, Snow said, tightening his grip on Vermithor. Fry nodded. Yeah, they already know where we are. In the same breath, Blatier began to shout without warning. Those demons clad in human skins crawl toward us. Shall we allow them to defile us? Rise, my children, my brothers. Rise and answer their aggression with iron and fire. At his call, and as if by sorcery, hundreds, no thousands, of torches flared to life throughout the forest encircling Fry and his companions. The church's followers appeared everywhere out of nowhere, surging forward with weapons drawn toward their enemies. What in the hell is happening? Fry said, violet light sparking in his eyes. He had been spreading his dark aura from the very beginning, and he hadn't sensed anything. Yet in a single instant, thousands of people were within his domain, as if they had been there the whole time. You're telling me they have a way to slip past my senses this easily? Either they had teleported directly into place, or they had been here from the start and hid their presence. Neither possibility felt plausible to Fry. If we wish to survive the darkness of this world, we must stop acting like humans. The Lord of Light has spoken to me. His words washed this body clean of weakness and frailty. A great power awaits us, and we must open our hands to receive it. We must not act like humans, but take the Lord of Light himself as our model and follow in his steps. The Lord of Light would not forgive his enemies, nor grant them freedom. He would punish them for what they do. And so, my beloved ones, we must fight and purge this world of evil. Joseph Bladier's heresy droned on for a long while, and battle was on the verge of erupting. Fry had grown sick of listening, yet he couldn't pinpoint Bladier's location, and the source of the voice remained unknown. It came from everywhere at once, like Bladier was whispering right beside their ears, ensuring they heard him. Then, at the moment the church's followers drew near and the three prepared to fight, the sky around them blazed, and a colossal being swept overhead on white wings. "Let the purification begin." Bladier's words rang out, and in the same instant, that war angel appeared from nothing, opening her mouth toward Fry and his companions. Their faces darkened at once, especially as they took a harder look at the angel. Unlike the one that had appeared in the past, this time it was a different one. The previous had seemed male. This one was female, her features unmistakably womanly. But the pressure she exerted was the same, equal to the other. In that moment, their fears became reality. "The church, they have another war angel," all three said at once. Just before the angel unleashed that immense beam of light capable of killing those at SS+, the torrent of light descended like a waterfall, swallowing Fry and his companions whole. The aura kept pouring for several minutes before the angel finally ceased, closing both mouth and eyes to recharge. At the same time, a ring of holy power formed a barrier around her for protection. Meanwhile, the church's followers rushed in, surrounding the crater of devastation the angel had left behind. The pit was incredibly deep, but contrary to expectation, they found it completely empty, without a trace of their enemies. Scanning their surroundings, they immediately began searching, shouts echoing everywhere like madmen hunting a prey bold enough to flee. The war angel, too, began circling above the forest in search of them, but found no sign. At the last instant, before the beam of aura could strike their heads, Fry had used his teleportation ability to whisk them far, far away at random. Noctera was vast, its forests stretching for terrifying distances, so putting space between them wasn't hard. And the moment they were clear, Aegon immediately produced a strange device that looked like a totem, which raised a crimson barrier around them. Hidden among the trees, they watched from afar as the torches of the church's followers fanned out in all directions, searching. "Looks like they've lost our trail," Snow said, as Aegon gestured toward the device in his hands. "This shadow totem can perfectly conceal the presence of anyone within its field, so they won't sense us no matter what. It's a handy tool. Its only flaw is it breaks after a single use," Aegon added blandly, setting the totem down at their feet. "So, what's our plan? Do we fight them? That doesn't seem optimal to me. That war angel can suppress those at SS+. Not to mention, the battle wouldn't necessarily end even if they defeated the angel." Bladier and his cohort were lying in wait somewhere, hidden among the trees while the church's followers prowled around them. Fry and his companions began working out a plan, how to deal with their enemies. "Keep searching. There's no way they've gotten far," one of the church's followers shouted, torch in hand as he prowled for those who had dared trespass upon his sacred ground. "They're strong, but remember, you don't have to defeat them. All you need to do is reveal their location, and our dear bishop will handle the rest. Dying to fulfill the Lord of Light's will is a great honor few truly grasp. There is no end more glorious than this. Our enemies will writhe in hell, while we are reborn. Stronger, purer. That is the destiny we seek. Do not fear death. Death is the beginning, not the end." Among the swarms of the church's faithful flooding the forest were many who kept spewing such speeches, people of high rank within the church. Their words inflamed their followers, stoking them to a fever pitch, indifferent to death. Their enemies were no ordinary foes. Fry Starlight, Snow Lionheart, and the enigmatic prince, Aegon. It was obvious this trio could slaughter them with ease, yet the church's followers didn't care. So long as they could contribute even a little to bringing them down, they didn't mind dying for such a cause. Hidden among the trees as rain began to fall from nowhere. A strange rain, not made of water, but of holy power. Fry and the others watched in silence. "They've been brainwashed," Aegon said, recognizing the signs of manipulation. "These church followers are the product of ceaseless indoctrination and deceit by the High Bishop and his circle. They planted extremist ideas in their minds and made them believe their cause is the truest, so much so that they don't mind dying. Manipulating people in the name of religion. It was a terrifying way to breed fanatics. They mean to kill us, even with their hero standing here," Aegon said, glancing at Snow, bearer of Vermithor. In other words, the one chosen by the Lord of Light. But his word no longer held any weight. "Since they claim to receive revelation from the Lord of Light, they have no need of me. I don't think they'll go so far as to kill me, but they likely won't listen to me anymore. Not when I oppose direct orders they believe came straight from the Lord they worship and love." In short, there was no way to turn the church's followers into allies, especially those in Nocthera, the secret stronghold of the Lord of Light's faithful. "Our priorities now: find Bladier, confirm he's the one controlling those angels, and look for Saint Uriel. If Aegon's assumption is right, they may sacrifice her to summon something far more sinister." Sitting on the ground as the sacred rain soaked him, Fry set the nameless mask on his face, hiding his skin. "The best way to operate now is to split up and search. The two of you are strong enough to handle yourselves. The moment either of you finds any lead to our targets, send a signal and we regroup immediately." That was the plan Fry laid out. "Not a bad idea," Aegon said in agreement. He preferred working alone anyway. It was the best way to set the traps he liked to prepare in advance. Snow didn't comment. Instead he studied Fry, who sat before him. Something about him suggested he was hiding something up his sleeves. Aegon agreed at once and moved to depart. "I'll push deeper north. The rest is yours," he said with a smile before cloaking himself in the glow of lightning and darting away. "The totem will lose effect soon, so move now and mask your presence as much as possible, or you'll draw the angel." Aegon warned one last time, then vanished among the grasses and trees. Snow and Fry remained. Fry sat fitting the nameless mask, and Snow stood behind him. Snow wanted to ask, but he didn't press since Fry hadn't spoken of it. "I'll head west. Fry, don't overdo it or try to shoulder this alone. Remember, I'm on your side," he said, his eyes gleaming gold. Fry gave a curt nod. "I know, and I truly appreciate it. Be careful out there." Snow nodded back, wrapped himself in aura, and sped off. Fry was finally alone. The moment Snow and Aegon were far enough, he pulled back his sleeves and bared his skin, revealing what he'd been hiding. From beneath his pale flesh, lines of black crept forth, like filthy worms of shadow. Fry felt his body changing by the moment. His power had grown anything but stable. "I need to hurry and purge this damned shadow." Rising to his feet again, he kept his face hidden behind the nameless mask. That mask always helped him keep his power in check, and his nerves under control. "It's been a while since I last explored that library. I suppose I'll have to visit it soon." Within the depths of the nameless mask lay thousands of strange books, waiting for him to leaf through them all. And the blood path forced him to kill without pause if he wished to grow stronger faster. "I can't enter the library right now. Dealing with the church and the shadow takes priority. But at the very least, I can increase my power without restraint, by killing as many of the Lord of Light's devotees as possible." He had sent Snow and Aegon in different directions, urging them to conserve strength and hunt for clues leading to Bladier. It was the best plan, truly, but Fry had never intended to follow it. "I can't let Weskir's shadow shackle me. If I want to rise to a level where I can defeat my enemies, I need to kill far many more. And the church would be the new prey." Most of the church's followers were merely ordinary people, misled and manipulated until their faith blinded them. You could say the vast majority hadn't done anything that merited death. They were victims, and Fry knew all of this already, yet he intended to kill them anyway. Everyone in this life has the freedom to choose. Yes, you were manipulated, deceived by others, but in the end, you chose this path all the same. You chose to worship the Lord of Light and obey his orders, no matter how extreme or senseless, so far that you're ready to die for him. From the brush, Fry stepped out before a group of church followers, who screamed the instant they saw him. But Fry walked toward them calmly, unfazed by the weapons leveled at him. You've chosen. Now face the consequences of your choice. Slash. With a single sweep of his sword, Fry sent a colossal arc of aura that swept through the dozens before him, severing every head before they even realized what had happened. He's here. The intruder is Arg! One of the church's followers screamed, only for Fry to take his head as well. You believed what you chose to believe, and here you are, losing your lives to my blade, one after another. Slash. Upon Nocthera's sacred ground, blood spilled and the dead fell one after the other. This life is anything but fair. Had you crossed paths with a virtuous hero, perhaps you might have been saved. The plan had been to find Bladier, defeat him, strip the church of its angels, then withdraw. A plan meant to spare the church's followers who had nothing to do with this mere weaklings whose existence was as good as nothing. Unfortunately, I'm no hero. Hands stained with their blood, Fry cut them down one after another. And little by little that familiar feeling returned. The feel of blood slick across his body, his muscles boiling with the heat of war and death. That feeling was what made Fry kill more, and proof that he was growing stronger. The blood path drove him forward, pushing him to higher tiers he needed to reach as fast as possible. No sooner had the battle begun than Fry had killed many of them, and chaos followed in his wake. Chaos that drew the celestial creature that had been circling the region from the start. Above his head, the war angel appeared once more, shaking the land with the pressure of her aura. The instant she caught sight of Fry, she opened her mouth, and the roaring beam of aura poured forth, annihilating everything in its path. But that overwhelming strike touched nothing but earth and the corpses Fry had left behind. Using his teleportation ability, he vanished and slipped the attack with ease, then reappeared elsewhere among the church's ranks, tearing through them as if nothing had happened. Screams rose everywhere, and the dead dropped one by one. The angel pursued Fry at once, attacking him again. But each time she targeted him, he disappeared, only to reappear farther away to reap more followers. It repeated several times. In a short span, hundreds died, and the church stood powerless to halt a single man. The angel is strong. That blast of hers can kill even those at SS+. Slash. Ripping through more and more bodies, Fry kept one eye on the angel wheeling overhead. She may be strong, but she's simple. One attack in her entire arsenal, and she's forced to recharge after every shot, like a machine. Fighting her was annoying all the same. Her holy barrier was hard to pierce. But avoiding her was child's play for someone like Fry, who could teleport instantaneously. Keep spewing your filth at me as much as you like. You'll touch nothing but a mirage. By day's end, nothing around you will remain but the dead. Then the one who sent you will learn who he's dealing with. Fry could more than handle the angel, even defeat her, but he saw no need. It would only drain him pointlessly. Killing the church's followers, on the other hand, fed his strength. And that was exactly what he welcomed more than anything. As the fight dragged on, the church's followers began to understand. To understand what the Ultras had suffered since the war began. They began to grasp who the Black Death was, and why he'd been given that name. Fry Starlight, the man who had borne most of the war against the Ultras alone and made them taste endless ruin, now turned his blade on the very ones who had chosen to follow the Lord of Light. Minutes earlier, they had been ready to face death itself to fulfill their god's command. But now, face to face with the man drowning them in his viscous killing intent. One after another, many of them broke into screams and fled, turning their backs on the figure whose face a black mask rendered all the more terrifying. Their blessed angel, in whom they had placed such faith, was of no use against this monster. He toyed with her with ease, as if she were nothing but a child's plaything. One after another, the church's followers ran. "Stop! How dare you flee before the enemy?" One of the bishops bellowed, furious. He was supposed to command them and keep them on the field. But he had lost control completely. He tried to halt them, but only seconds passed before his head toppled from his shoulders as well. "What?" he managed, staring at Fry who had appeared before him. It was the last word he spoke, and Frey's visage was the last sight he saw in life. The church's followers scattered in panic, and Fry walked after them. "That's right, run. Run back the way you came." Step by measured step, he followed, teleporting whenever the angel tried to strike him down. Amid the followers' screams and the thunder of the angel's bombardments, Fry walked calmly through the chaos, violet light blazing in his eyes, fixed upon his victims, the ones whose blood he meant to spill. "Run, and show me the path to the place where your leaders are hiding," Fry said, a terrifying smile forming beneath the mask, a sadistic, blood-soaked smile of a man who relished the kill. "In this way, I'll be able to kill you all." The hunt had only just begun, and a massacre was about to unfold. Far from where Fry was, deep within Nocthera, the city of eternal night, in a strange, wondrous place built amid the heavens, stood a majestic edifice overlooking the skies, from which poured the waterfall of holy power that nourished the land with blessings. At its summit stood 3 men, 2 in pure white vestments, the third cloaked in black. They were none other than the church's 3 bishops, Bladier, Platini, and Callistes. "It seems the battle has already begun," Callistes remarked, hands clasped behind his back as he stared toward the distant horizon, commenting on the fight raging on the far side of Nocthera. "Fry Starlight, he lives up to the rumors. A true monster." Smiling, Callistes turned to Bladier. "Is that why you put the name Starlight on the Revelation tablet, High Bishop Bladier?" he asked lightly. Silence fell. The other bishops showed no reaction, but had anyone else been present, the words out of Callistes' mouth would have sparked a catastrophe. "No, that wasn't the reason," Bladier said as he turned to face what stood behind him. At the very crest of the waterfall, at the highest point in Nocthera, there rose a wondrous golden tree, its branches and boughs spreading so wide they covered a vast portion of the sky. This was the phenomenon that had fed the church its power, the cornerstone of the name it had built for itself. Those who knew of the tree's existence could be counted on one hand, and Bladier had allowed only a select few to set foot in this sacred place. This tree appeared out of nowhere centuries ago, and it said the sword Vermithor was drawn from within it. "Thanks to its power, we were able to forge this institution, one strong enough now to fight in this war," Bladier said, eyes fixed on the far horizon. "We must be cautious from here on. If this place is ever discovered, that would be our end," warned Mikhail Platini in a grave tone. "For this religion is nothing but a lie we made the whole world believe. There were many secrets hidden within the church's walls, secrets that must never leak into the world. The Lord of Light abandoned us long ago. We have heard not a single word from him since the first war, when Casus Valerian sacrificed himself," Bladier said, his expression deepening. The Lord of Light had forsaken them, had said nothing to them. Yet he had appeared again recently, choosing a new champion, Snow Lionheart. At that moment, Joseph Bladier did not miss his chance and played his cards shrewdly. "That so-called Revelation tablet is nothing more than a device we made ourselves, deceiving our followers into believing it a heavenly shrine capable of receiving the Lord's words. That light which had descended from the heavens was simply power Bladier borrowed from the towering tree behind him. Its power was so pure and immense that any who beheld it would assume it came from something not of man. And thus Bladier, with cunning, set forth his decrees, as if they had been revealed upon the tablet. At the time I named the Ultras, our natural enemies, as foes along with the Valerian family. Once they fell, we could seize control of the empire with ease," Bladier said with a scowl, recalling those days. "As for the third force worth fearing, the combined strength of the other 3 great houses, I chose Starlight to weaken them, for they were the weakest of the 3 and the easiest to eliminate." He was right. At that time, House Starlight had but a single fighter who had barely reached SS-. Carmen Starlight. In other words, they were an easy target. Scowling, Gladiator stared out toward the horizon where the battle raged. Who would have thought that weak house would bring forth a monster capable of crushing the other families single-handedly? Fry Starlight must die here, and we must reclaim Vermithor and its bearer. Gladiator issued his orders and bared his forearms. Across them, blood-red sigils were carved deep into his skin. Hideous to the eye, yet the sight of them made Ramiel Kalisa's eyes kindle at once. Are we going to use both war angels in this battle? Gladiator answered with a nod. We will use everything at our disposal to win, even if it means sacrificing our followers. Redoubling his resolve, Gladiator turned to Platini. Tell me, how fares the new saint? Gladiator brought up the subject out of nowhere. Platini's answer was brief. She resisted at first, but in the end, she surrendered to her fate. The three bishops moved together, following Platini, toward the place beneath that mighty tree. There, a place of sorcery spread out like a paradise upon the earth, a vast spring of pristine waters, saturated with holy power. From that spring the waterfall flowed, but the bishop's eyes ignored the spectacle and fixed upon a single point. As you can see, the legacy transfer is proceeding smoothly. Soon she will awaken, a complete saint loyal to us, bearing the powers of her foremothers, Platini said, while Gladiator nodded in satisfaction. Before them, a naked girl lay within the spring. It was the only place where any color but blue could be seen. Red was there as well, in abundance. Her eyes were closed. She had been unconscious for a long time, unable to endure the torment. All over her bare body, dozens of tubes had been driven in, pierced into her flesh, pumping strange blood into her veins. There were so many tubes, and she bled without cease. Yet her wounds constantly mended under the spring's holy power, keeping her alive throughout. And so Platini kept vigil over her all the while, cutting her, inscribing strange runic letters across her naked skin. Then, as soon as the spring healed her, he would begin again, over and over, until those things were carved into her very being. The pain was immense, the torment greater still. She was forced to endure the church's mad rites, eyes shut against the world. She was none other than Uriel Platini, the saint chosen to live and to meet the fate of her foremothers. Snow Leonhardt's POV. So, it has begun. Even from this far away, I can still feel that explosive aura. Frey's power. Just as I expected, the moment he pushed us aside, he threw himself into battle. And most likely, he will slaughter every last one of the church's followers standing before him, no matter their motives or their pasts. Without exception, he will kill them all, to feed the demands of that blood path he has chosen for himself. Ever since the day Fry somehow fused with my body, I felt as though I started to understand him, my mysterious friend who carried more secrets than anyone else. That day he must have glimpsed the world through my eyes, but at the same time, I saw through his. I felt what he felt. I lived, if only for an instant, what it meant to exist as Fry Starlight. The blood path is a road of darkness, forcing its bearer into endless killing, drowning in blood until the red floods form rivers and seas. A truly demonic path, one that even Fry himself could not predict where it would ultimately lead. The paths. All my life, I believed there was only one way to become stronger. Unceasing training, polishing the body, absorbing aura, meditating until the next breakthrough. That method served me well for a time, and I thought it would carry me to my peak. But reality was different. Eventually, I struck the wall. No matter how hard I trained, no matter how much I tried, I could never break past Ranke. And yet, in a cruel twist, I shattered the shackle and broke through the wall the moment I devoured the corpse of a single human being. Raising my fist before my eyes, I let my aura flow freely, golden energy gathering thickly around it. I am not human, or rather, only part of me is human. That was why the human method worked for me for a while. But it revealed only a fraction of the power I sought. The other part of me is demonic. The blood injected into my body again and again since childhood. That makes me, too, a demonic contractor, giving me the right to walk a demonic path. The method of Yosefka. To grow stronger with every corpse of my own kind I consume. A path fouler than even the one Fry follows. Perched on the branch of one of the tallest trees in the area, I watched the chaos around me while my thoughts drifted far. The human path, the demon path, the blood path. How many paths exist in this world? The demon's method, devouring his own kind, was but one training path of a high-seat demon, Yosefka, which meant that even among demons, there might be countless paths, each different from the next. And what of the other races far above in the heavens? Beings I know nothing of. The more knowledge I gained, the smaller I felt, like a mere ink drop lost in the vast canvas of existence. But then, what is the right path for me? What is the true way I must walk if I wish to reach the same kind of strength Fry holds? What must I sacrifice? What exactly must I do? I didn't yet know the answer, but I resolved to find it here no matter the cost. Leaping from the tree, I drew my blade vermithor, letting its holy power pour through me. From the moment we set foot in this strange land, my sword had behaved differently, almost as if it had returned home, to the place it was born. And because of that, I too felt a deep bond to this land, strengthening my conviction that the answer I sought lay here. Every time I synced my consciousness with vermithor, I caught glimpses of strange aura trails in the air, golden currents weaving through earth and sky, flooding even the void itself. No one else could see them. Only by synchronizing with vermithor and awakening the War King form was I able to perceive them. Golden aura currents swirling around me, often passing directly through my body. I couldn't tell what force could emit such energy, or whether it was even a living being at all. But I was almost certain. If I continued following these trails, they would lead me at last to Bladier and his followers, and perhaps to the very answer I sought. Thus, with my mind synchronized to vermithor, I pressed deeper into the city of eternal night. Minutes passed, then hours. Time fled swiftly as my senses focused on nothing but the golden aura trails. From time to time, I collided with stray church followers, but I cut them down with ease and pressed forward, using void step to shift constantly. Constant movement kept me from unnecessary fights, but it slowed my progress. Every distraction around me made me lose track of the golden trails, forcing me to stop and find them again, a process that wasted far too much time. That was why, even after hours, I had barely advanced at all. I must keep trying. I alone could perceive these trails. Fry was likely still fighting the church's hordes, while the prince, who knew what schemes lingered in his mind, or what he would do next, I wouldn't let him steer us the way he wanted. So I had to find the path myself, and that was what I focused on. In this way, I kept moving forward, while time sped past too quickly for my senses to grasp. From time to time, waves of destructive aura reached me from afar, proof that the war Fry had waged against the church was still raging. But I ignored it completely and kept following those trails. That immersion severed my connection to the world around me. I could see nothing but black, a darkness in which no light existed, save for those golden trails. That golden light grew stronger and stronger the farther I went, until it swelled from the size of a fist to envelop my entire body. And the more intense it became, the more I felt a bond with it, a longing for it, as if it were a part of my very being. The overwhelming experience stirred tangled feelings in my heart, sharpening my desire to explore that dormant side of myself. At some point, progress became smoother, and I stopped running into enemies. My link to the golden trails grew so strong that I stopped walking and began to sprint, surging forward in pursuit. After delving for a long time, I finally reached the end of the trail, the place from which that all-encompassing golden power sprang. What I saw left me speechless. At the end of the path stood a towering structure that pierced the dark sky. I couldn't make out its features. The world to me was still wrapped in shadow, but I could see what crowned it clearly. A tree. It was a tree. A colossal golden tree, its branches and leaves unfurled, radiating such power that I flinched and stood stunned. The golden aura path I had followed until now was only one among thousands of other trails, all of them leading to that tree. In that moment I realized, These were its roots, creeping everywhere across this land, feeding it with a mighty power that made it look like a paradise upon the earth. I couldn't see its true form. It was far above, in the sky. Yet before me it manifested in that shape of aura alone. Magnificent and awe-inspiring. A thing from another world. A phenomenon not wrought by human hands. So this is the church's secret. The secret behind that great waterfall, behind the prosperity the church enjoyed, the source of their intense holy power. There was no doubt. Bladier and the other bishops are there. I had found them, and to be honest, I burned to climb that place and end it myself. But I knew the true measure of the enemy's strength, and the unknowns they still hid. So, reluctantly, I chose to withdraw. Time to find Fry. Rather than charge in alone, it would be better to unite our strength and destroy them with a single strike. Separating my consciousness from Vermithor and letting the War King form fade, I finally regained my sense of the world around me, able at last to see colors other than black and gold. And then I found myself standing at a loss, unable to place where I was. I now stood in what seemed to be a labyrinth. A strange forest constructed in such twisting fashion that getting lost was child's play. Where am I now? And how much time has passed? Exactly. Tracking that golden trail had severed my sense of time and place. I had focused so hard I'd failed to realize several days had gone by since I split from Fry and Aegon. I can't feel Frey's aura. Has the fight already ended? Or am I simply too far away to sense him? Knowing I had no time to waste, I plunged back into the forest at once, using Void Step. I hadn't been attacked by church followers for a while now. Did that mean they couldn't reach this place? It was strange. True, this forest felt like a maze, saturated with a peculiar aura. Even so, I found my way through with ease, and going in and out was no challenge for me. I didn't understand the secret behind this place. But so long as I could move freely within it, that was all that mattered. Delving into the recesses of the sacred land, I cut my way forward in search of Fry, intent on ending the battle with the church once and for all. 3 days had passed since Fry and his companions had parted ways. Each of them had spent those days fighting in their own way, seeking to bring the church, whose malice had scarred them, under submission. Snow Lionheart, thanks to his direct bond with Vermithor, had uncovered one of the church's deepest secrets, the place where the High Bishop and his retinue were hiding. He had been so utterly immersed in tracing the trails of that great tree that he lost all sense of time. It had taken him 3 full days to reach the tree, and 2 entire days just to return and escape from the labyrinthine forest he had wandered into. But Snow's first priority had been to find Fry Starlight. The last time they crossed paths, 5 days ago, Fry had been slaughtering the church's followers. Back then, the resonance of his SSS-ranked aura had spread so far and wide that Snow could feel it even from a great distance. Now, however, there was no trace of him. Unable to discern what had truly happened, the Empire's hero resolved to head to the last place where he had sensed Frey's presence, the battlefield itself. Using Void Step, it did not take him long to arrive at the destined place. Yet the moment he set foot there, Snow froze in horror at the grotesque sight before him. What in the hell happened here? Step after step, Snow walked among the countless corpses piled before him. Bodies drained of every drop of blood. It wasn't the number of corpses, nor the savagery of their deaths that unsettled him. He had grown accustomed to such scenes after fighting at Frey's side against the Ultras. His strange friend had long since become an unstoppable killing machine. What stunned Snow this time was the state in which the corpses had been left. All of them, without exception, shared the same fate. Kneeling by one, he examined the signs of death up close. The mark of the sword was plain and undeniable, proof that Fry had slain the man with a single strike. That was how Fry Starlight fought, ending his enemies in one blow, one corpse at a time. But the moment Fry killed them, something strange befell their bodies. Their skin shriveled, their blood dried away, leaving twisted husks. Skin stretched tight over bone, as if life itself had been stripped away along with every last thing the body once held. This had been the fate of all the corpses around Snow, without exception. He couldn't understand what was happening, until, after scrutinizing more closely, he noticed something bizarre and familiar. At once, he turned to another corpse. The same thing, and another, all bore the same mark. Those damned scribbles again. Snow cursed, as he recognized the same blood-carved language etched into the flesh of the dead. An incomprehensible script, like lost runes from an ancient age. Among the sea of thousands of corpses strewn around Snow, many belonged to angels as well, creations the church had unleashed against Fry, it seemed. But he had felled them all. And even across the bodies of those mechanical-like beings, the same bloody inscriptions sprawled. Snow did not know their meaning, but from all they had witnessed thus far, he could only associate them with sacrifice. The church, they have a way to sacrifice others, to summon something greater in return. It was a pattern that had repeated again and again, enough that they had even sacrificed the Saint Urasha. Don't tell me. They deliberately sacrificed all these people? Rage boiled within him as Snow began to grasp the church's true intent, and the nature of his enemies. They sent this many weaklings against people like me and Fry. There was never any chance they would survive. In other words, they sent them to die, under the pretense of serving the Lord of Light and his cause. It was a twisted, filthy tactic, so vile that Snow saw no difference between the church and the demons themselves. Sacrifice, blood, exploiting humans. Tell me, what difference is there between the so-called pure church and the foul demons they claim to oppose? The fury that consumed Snow nearly drove him to storm back and attack Bladier and the others himself. But at last he mastered his temper, forcing himself to focus on finding Fry. Drawing Vermithor, Snow gathered a torrent of flame through the holy sword, then raised it toward the heavens. This will draw attention, but we don't have time to waste. Through his blade, Snow launched a colossal fireball into the dark sky. The flame soared upward, before exploding in a dazzling spectacle like a firework that lit the world around him. The signal was clear. Even if they were miles away, his companions would surely see it. Yet no matter how long Snow waited, there was no answer. Not from Fry, not from Aegon. Has something happened to them? The thought invaded his mind, but he quickly dismissed it. No, Fry would never fall so easily, nor would Prince Aegon, who has survived far worse. Charging onward, Snow resumed his search, desperate to find them soon. His pursuit stretched on for a long while. Hours bled away, until Snow began to worry he might never find them at all. And then, just as that dark thought took hold, he felt it. A strange, savage aura pressing in from afar. A wild and dreadful pressure that sent shivers crawling down his spine. He froze among the towering trees, staring in its direction, as silence fell over the land. The oppressive aura was so ominous that his instincts screamed at him to turn back. But instead, Snow felt a strange familiarity with that feral power, enough that he defied his instincts and rushed headlong toward its source. Yet Snow felt a strange familiarity with that feral aura, enough that he defied his instincts and rushed headlong toward its source. Using Void Step, he crossed vast distances in the blink of an eye, drawing ever closer. With each step, cold sweat trickled down his back, for the pressure of that aura grew heavier, sharper, more suffocating. What cursed aura is this? Snow muttered unconsciously, until he reached the edge of a cliff overlooking another vast forest stretching beneath the dark sky. At its center, nestled among the endless green, he finally saw it. A colossal mass of violet aura blazed like a second sun. Not of fire, but of pure, searing power. It was immense, overwhelming, so heavy that Snow felt his own body grow heavier beneath its weight. Still, he pushed on, for now he was almost certain who this aura belonged to. Drawing closer and closer, Snow reached the source at last. Amid the trees lay a great lake, and at its center sat a lone man. His long white hair fluttered in the aura's violent currents, his black garments whipping in the air as if on fire, bathed in the burning light of that violet sun. It was Fry. He looked utterly consumed, his face drawn tight with pain. But the moment Snow neared, Frey's eyes snapped open. Their gazes met. Fry inhaled deeply, struggling to draw that raging violet aura into himself, the earth around him quaking violently in response. The strain of containing it boiled the energy so fiercely that the lake itself evaporated, vanishing entirely. Minutes passed. Finally, Fry succeeded in containing it, stepping out of the dried lake bed with heavy, dragging steps. "Snow, forgive me, I didn't notice your presence," Fry said, apologetic. Snow remained silent for a moment, then finally asked the question that had consumed him since the beginning. "What just happened, Fry? What was that aura?" "Ah, you mean this?" Fry lifted his palm. A small sphere of violet aura bloomed above it, like a tiny sun of condensed destruction. It was small, yet it carried the exact same energy as before. With a dismissive wave, Fry dissolved it into nothing. "Nothing special. I've been trying to develop a new technique for my arsenal. But so far, every attempt has failed." "A new technique?" Snow whispered, though his body remembered all too well the crushing pressure. "What kind of cursed technique carries such terrifying power?" he thought, staring at Fry. And then he noticed something he had failed to see earlier, distracted as he'd been by the overwhelming display. "Fry, you—" Snow began, startled. Fry immediately understood, pulling on his mask once more to hide his face. "Ah, I've spent so long alone that I forgot myself." But Snow had already seen. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice low.
Fry sighed.
In just a few short days he had changed dramatically. Now that Snow was truly looking, the signs were clear. His face was pale, marked with heavy black rings beneath his eyes, as though he had aged years overnight. His arms were thinner, harsher, their usual color leached away, as if some wasting sickness had taken hold. "I'm cursed, my friend. That's all there is to it," Fry said, as if it were the most ordinary truth in the world. "Cursed? What curse? Who placed it on you?" Snow pressed, questions tumbling from him. This time, Fry chose to answer honestly. The two sat before the barren lakebed as Fry told the tale of the shadow within him. Weskir's shadow crept through his veins, draining his body, his mind, even his power. So far, Fry had kept the symptoms in check, aided by the nameless mask that suppressed the shadow's influence. But lately, the symptoms had worsened rapidly, the shadow's grip tightening. A warning, a reminder that time was running out. He would soon have to face it or pay the price. "Fortunately, the cure lies here within the church's domain," Fry said. "Though I don't yet know what it is. That's why I've tried breaking through their lines, aiming for their leaders. But I couldn't find their hiding place." He recalled the days of bloodshed. "I killed every soldier the church threw at me. I even fought their war angel. I tried to make them lead me to their masters. But the plan failed. In the end, I hit a labyrinth, impossible to cross unless certain conditions were met." At the mention of the labyrinth, Snow immediately thought of the place he himself had encountered. "That labyrinth, I think I can cross it. In fact, I already have," Snow admitted with a crooked smile. Fry chuckled, unsurprised. "As expected of Vermithor's bearer. Their defenses mean nothing to you." "To be honest, it didn't feel like a labyrinth at all," Snow said. "I simply followed a trail of aura I felt drawn to, and it led me straight to their sanctuary. A strange temple shaped like a towering spire. At its peak, a tree." "A tree?" Fry asked, narrowing his eyes. Snow nodded. "Yes, a golden tree radiating the purest aura I've ever seen." The moment Snow mentioned the tree, Fry fell into deep thought. Snow noticed his reaction at once. You know something about it, don't you?" he asked, not expecting an answer. But to his surprise, Fry nodded. "In a way, yes. I believe I know what that tree is. Most likely, it's the World Tree." "The World Tree?" "Yes, though I'm not entirely certain. A tree of that kind shouldn't even exist here on Earth. Though honestly," Fry smirked darkly, lifting his gaze toward the star-studded sky and the colossal moon above, "I doubt we're still on Earth at all. I don't know much about the World Tree." But what I do know is that its very appearance requires a power on the level of the one who forged the blade in your hands. The same one who forged Vermithor. Are you talking about the Lord of Light? That's right. Frey's reply sank into silence, a grim possibility flashing across Snow's mind. Are you saying the Lord of Light truly stands with the church? If that were true, it would mean they had no chance of victory at all. But Frey shook his head firmly. Impossible. The Lord of Light only cares for one human, the chosen wielder of the sacred blade he forged himself. In other words, you, Snow. If the Lord of Light sides with anyone, it's you. Snow blinked in surprise, then lowered his gaze to Vermithor, the sword that had been resonating with him more and more each day. That doesn't make sense. If the Lord of Light truly stands with me, then why issue such twisted decrees? To exterminate the Starlights, the Valyrians. If he's on my side, he'd know I'd stand with them. Why would he push me into fighting his own followers? Snow demanded, his voice tight with confusion. Frey was quiet for a while, as though he too had wrestled with the same thought for long. Finally, behind the mask of Nameless, he muttered, "In that case, are we so sure the Lord of Light gave those commands in the first place?" "What?" Snow breathed, stunned. "Think about it," Frey pressed. "Isn't the Tablet of Revelation supposed to be the means by which the Lord of Light communicates with mortals?" "Yes," Snow said cautiously. "And do you really believe that? That a being of such immense power needs pawns of flesh to slay his enemies for him? That he'd scrawl his will into some worthless slab, instead of speaking directly to his chosen messenger on this earth? You." The thought struck like lightning. Had the Lord of Light truly given those orders? And if so, why address them to the church rather than Snow, the very vessel of his will? Questions, endless and grim, spread like cracks through their certainties. Frey hadn't known about the 3 decrees until recently, when the church had turned against them. Yet suspicion had gnawed at him from the moment he'd heard of them. "I have no proof, but keep this possibility in mind, Snow. There's a strong chance it's not the Lord of Light at all, but High Bishop Bladier and his ilk, pulling the strings in his name. And by doing so, they can deceive every last soul who bows to their false god, making them obey without question. As long as the name of the Lord of Light was invoked, the faithful would do anything." "If you're right," Snow said darkly, "then this entire religion was built on a lie, a faith that had ruled the earth for centuries, with vast legions of followers. Its history, its structure, its very existence, nothing but a fabrication spun by men." "The Lord of Light exists," Frey admitted, "but he isn't a god. He's a powerful being, yes, perhaps even unimaginably so, but nothing more than that." The weight of the truth hung between them. Snow sat in silence, his thoughts reeling. The Lord of Light was real, but not divine, merely another entity of great power within the vast, merciless cosmos. There were far greater beings still. The demon king Agaroth, the first seat, Crimson, whose presence was said to rival even the demon king. The Pantheon's king, Meter, the mysterious great ones. So many monsters under the same heavens. And in comparison, they were but dust. Frey had lived with this awareness for a long time. Snow was only now beginning to walk that path. It was a road that led easily to despair. And perhaps for that reason, Snow rose to his feet with a strained smile. "Then let's go, Frey. Let's put an end to this." Frey stood too, inclining his head in agreement, hiding his face behind the mask once more. "Ending the church's tyranny. Finding a way to deal with the shadow inside me. Discovering the path that will make you stronger. Rescuing the saint. All of it will follow once we win this war. They've existed for centuries. They're bound to have countless tricks hidden up their sleeves. Prepare yourself. This will be no easy battle," Frey warned. Snow chuckled. "It was never a fair fight from the start. What difference does it make now?" With a grin, he surged ahead, Frey close behind. "I'll take the lead, since I'm the only one who can cross that labyrinth." He glanced back. "But tell me, should we leave the prince behind? Let him be. He'll find his own way." Dragging him with us would be pointless. Whatever the prince was planning, he'd appear when the time was right. Fry doubted that Labyrinth would hold him for long. So it's just the two of us against the whole church, huh? Snow said, wearing a grim expression. Are you afraid? Fry asked with a mocking smile. Not at all, Snow exhaled, shaking his head. Since the moment I started walking beside you, I've had to carry the weight of this war on my shoulders, as if we were the only ones fighting it. Maybe that's just one more curse laid upon you. And as Snow thought back, he realized, from the very start of this war, that's how it had always been. Fry fought one battle after another, bearing most of the war on his own. He had been the first to fight at Shiskler Bay, the first to lead the vanguard on the Ultras continent. He faced Dragoth, the human demon, and defeated him. Then fought every Ultras commander alone and survived. And now he stood on the verge of confronting the church in its entirety. Snow had only recently begun to accompany him, yet he already found himself carrying the same heavy burden, coming to understand what Fry had lived through all this time. This isn't a curse, Fry said. It's simply the natural consequence of my own choices. I chose to fight this war, and what's happening now is the inevitable result of that choice. That's all. I think your concept of fighting a war is very different from everyone else's, Snow said. There is a vast difference between taking part in a war and shouldering the whole of it alone. That was what Snow wanted to say. But he had begun to understand Frey's way of thinking more and more, and realized such words would mean nothing to him. Fry had chosen this himself. Well then, at the very least, I can share this curse with you from now on. Activating the War King form, Snow readied himself to breach the labyrinth. We've already reached it. Stay close to me from here on, Snow said, and Fry nodded. Following the golden trails of the World Tree, Snow pierced the labyrinth with Fry at his side. The maze was strange, shifting ceaselessly by some sorcery. An alien aura flooded the place, numbing the senses of all who entered. Under normal circumstances, it would have been impossible to pass without possessing whatever the labyrinth demanded for entry. Even if one tried to fly over it, they would lose themselves all the same. It was a truly bizarre maze, but Snow crossed it with ease. We're almost there, Snow said after they advanced for a while, prompting Fry to prepare. The battle would likely begin the moment they arrived. Fry, I know the timing is terrible, but I need to tell you this before we fight. He spoke without looking back, and Fry watched his friend's back. Don't try to shoulder this alone. You're not fighting this war by yourself. My words may sound strange or hollow, but I truly intend to fight beside you to the very end, no matter what we face, no matter how heavy the burden becomes. Be certain that I'll be there. There's no need to say another word, Snow. I understand what you're trying to tell me, Fry said with a faint smile. To be honest, I had intended to carry this war to the end alone. My strength was the only thing I've trusted until now. But in the end, I'm only one man. No matter how strong I am, and no matter how much I try to deny it, I have limits I cannot surpass. I'm more fragile than I seem, and I could collapse at any moment. Fry chuckled softly, remembering what happened to him in his fight against Dragoth. How life had driven him to the edge of madness. I could break at any moment. If that happens, I'll rely on you to save the day, my dear friend. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile, turning Snow's head in surprise. He had not expected to hear those words from him. Silence hung between them for a moment. Then Snow returned the smile. Count on me, my friend. In that instant, a notification flashed from nowhere. Something Fry hadn't seen in a long time. A ping from the system he'd barely used of late. Ding. Snow Lionheart. Current affection points. 99. Snow Lionheart trusts you completely and sees you as an irreplaceable ally, to the point he is prepared to die for you if necessary. Maximum reached. Affection will not increase further unless certain conditions are met. Staring at the notification, Fry understood he had gained an indispensable ally. Snow's points had reached 99, and Fry would be unable to raise them to 100 except under conditions he knew little about. Even so, The current level of his bond with his hero left him more than satisfied. Snow was a friend and a brother Fry could not do without. There was still much between them that needed to be said. He still hadn't told Snow what happened to Danzo, and many secrets remained hidden. And yet Fry wished to treasure this bond with his friend, vowing that one day he would tell him everything. Perhaps then the condition would be met, and Snow Lionheart would become the second person to reach 100 points after Sansa. Thank you, my friend. Watching Snow's back, Fry smiled as the two of them continued through the labyrinth. Silence settled. Neither spoke. Snow remained focused, while Fry, from beneath his skin, the crawling shadows stirred, making his power and aura surge and falter. He did not notice, but filaments of violet lightning skittered around him as a strange echo rang out. Glimpses of a distant future. An echo of clashing blades, of blood spilling without end, as two warriors fought upon a battlefield, fighting to the death, each intent on killing the other. One was a radiant hero, shining with golden sigils that covered his body. The other was a figure of darkness, a man wearing a baleful black mask. This is the kind of world we live in, the kind of hell we are forced to walk. As their swords collided and disasters bloomed in their wake, thoughts and feelings surfaced. Fragments from someone who had abandoned everything and hidden his face behind a cold, lightless mask. In the end, Snow, my dear brother, everything was a lie. A sweet lie we chose to believe. But in the end, we are forced to face the truth. I'm truly sorry, my brother. Truly sorry. Amid the ruin, after a battle on another level entirely, a man sat, his face hidden to the very end behind that mask. In his arms lay another young man, a youth who had once been his brother. And in a few seconds, one candle of life went out, while the other remained seated, staring at his friend's corpse. I'm truly sorry. The world changes every day ceaselessly, especially in times of war. A full week had passed since Fry and his companions reached the Holy Island and uncovered one of the church's secrets. Nocthera, the city of eternal night, a place where the sun never rises. 7 days. On the 7th, the long-awaited clash was fated to begin. At the summit of the great edifice, where the golden world tree stood like the church's beacon, the 3 bishops gathered, along with most who held the rank of metropolitan. They were waiting. It's time, Bladier said, his eyes kindling with a pure white light, his face twisted with contempt for those who dared oppose him. Recovering Vermithor's bearer is top priority, and slaying Fry Starlight is equally important. With his fall, House Starlight falls in its entirety, and the Empire loses its greatest weapon. Keep that in mind. Platini and Callistes nodded as one. We've already prepared the stage for them. Let's welcome them properly. The battle was about to erupt, and the church had readied its strongest weapons. Callistes, you'll remain behind. Make sure no one interferes with the legacy transfer. The new saint must be ready as soon as possible. Bladier issued his orders. Callistes inclined his head. Have no fear. Not a soul will cross this threshold. Turning toward the spring behind him, Callistes' gaze fell on Uriel Platini, who had lain there for many days. Whatever rite was being conducted in that place, it was nearly complete. Above them, the world tree shuddered from time to time, releasing a strange resonance as its glow intensified, feeding Bladier and the others with an inexhaustible stream of holy aura. The tree was their greatest weapon, and the saint was of immense importance as well. Bladier had no intention of retreating now. The church was about to fight at full strength, against Fry Starlight and Snow Lionheart, who had come dangerously close to the forbidden. Snow led the way, Fry at his back. They climbed swiftly, scaling the vast structure, their bodies steeped in a threatening aura, especially Fry, whose murderous intent chilled the air. They stormed into that land like a temple, ready for war. And they didn't have to wait long. The instant they appeared, a terrifying heavenly light descended from nowhere and drove them into the ground where they stood. Before them stood 5 men in a strange formation, chains curling around them and binding them to a peculiar angel that floated above. Do not kill Vermithor's bearer, He is of our flesh and blood. As for Fry Starlight, show no mercy. Death to any who defy the Lord of Light's will. The one in the center shouted. A middle-aged man with black hair and harsh features, clearly their leader. Fry and Snow endured the initial strike, but their eyes slid to the angel hovering over the five. That isn't a war angel. The being before them was neither the same type nor the same might as a war angel, yet it was stronger than ordinary angels. Taking repeated blasts from it would be unwise. Fire again! At the leader's command, the angel unleashed another volley. But Fry and Snow were already gone, one blinking away with teleportation, the other vanishing with void step. They aimed to erase the angel in a single swift strike. Yet as they closed in, dozens of lights flared from afar, raining down upon them from every direction without mercy. They held firm, but both were taken aback by the sudden appearance of so many stronger angels. Wings spread above them, while below, church followers advanced, bound to the angels by strange chains. It was as if they were feeding the angels' power, their very life force. The followers were pallid, like sufferers of a chronic anemia, while the angels above them brimmed with strength. Encircling Fry and Snow, they bombarded them without pause. The two held the line, especially Fry, who tore through the church's ranks at a speed the naked eye couldn't follow. Has your blindness gone so far that you can't perceive the truth? With a single sweep of Valyrian, he sent a vast violet arc that lopped 5 heads at once, then vaulted skyward to strike the angel. You bind your souls and cast away your lives to feed a worthless creature that dies to a single stroke of my blade. Amplifying his aura through Dark Sister, Fry shot forward like a black meteor and smashed into the angel, erasing it completely. At the same time, Snow Lionheart unleashed his arsenal of elements, throwing the field into chaos as he faced multiple foes at once. Despite the difference in numbers, the tide did not favor the church at all. Fighting on multiple fronts, Snow's eyes caught the faces of many followers straining in desperation to stop him. I don't understand. Why struggle this hard? Why throw away your lives to serve a being you know nothing about? Is your life so cheap? Through Vermithor, Snow sent wave after wave of pure light aura, its clarity surpassing the strength of the assembled angels combined. Are humans truly this easy to manipulate? Snow was clearly hesitant when it came to killing the church's followers, men and women deceived and driven by faith and blind devotion. Don't bother, Snow. They believe the Lord of Light is their God, and their God ordered them to exterminate people like me, said Fry, fighting nearby. Unlike Snow, he did not hesitate to kill them, right or wrong. They chose death for their cause, so let's give them the death they wanted. Fry was about to cut down more when a man in a black mask appeared out of nowhere and launched a rocket-like punch. Fry caught it with his sword at the last instant, yet the force hurled him back, smashing him through the temple wall. Through the islets of the nameless mask, Fry studied his new opponent with interest as he stepped from the rubble. That was a good punch. Before him, the man bared his face. It was none other than Mikhail Platini, the bishop. He was over 2 meters tall, white-haired, gold-eyed, with a massive scar over one eye. Fry Starlight, you dare speak of the noble sacrifices made by the Lord of Light's faithful, Platini said, drawing every church follower's gaze. Their faces lit at the sight of him. You're nothing but a bloodthirsty monster, fighting for slaughter and ruin. We, on the other hand, have a cause worth fighting for, in the name of the Lord of Light who showed us the way and led us out of darkness. Even if the church's followers die 1 billion times, their fate will still be better than that of a demon in human skin, faithless and honorless. Turning to the church's ranks, Platini shouted, any of the faithful who die today will find eternal bliss, and our enemies will rot in the torments of hell. He goaded them to throw their lives away, promising impossible rewards no sane mind should believe. Platini's words inflamed the church even further, filling them with zeal to fight for the false cause that had blinded them. The bishop is right. Follow the bishop. Let's purge the world of this monster who knows only bloodshed. They raved like fanatics beyond reason or debate. From behind them came another man, his aura pressure hammering the air as he clapped, a smile on his lips. Well said, my friends. Today, the whole world will learn that our cause is the righteous one. It was the High Bishop Bladier, joining the fray himself. Listening to it all, Fry laughed. Snow held his tongue. I'm honestly impressed at your ability to spit that much nonsense with such straight faces, Fry said dryly, stepping toward Bladier and his retinue. Have you gone so mad you craft a lie and then believe it yourself? Come on, spare me the drivel about faith and piety. Let's just fight to the death. Fray's words only enraged the faithful further. They had just heard him mock them and everything they did. You insolent heretic who doesn't know his place, Bladier snarled, advancing with Platini at his side and the church's retinue massed behind them. Believe me, I know my place very well, Fry replied. I'd love to expose the lie you used to fool the whole world. But as you can see, that would take far too much time and effort. There was nothing worse than trying to convince a zealot that his religion is false, a lie spun by another man. Instead, Fry chose the other path. Killing you all will put an end to this farce. So let's stop talking and destroy each other with everything we've got. They stamped the ground and launched forward together, detonating the earth beneath their feet. The High Bishop cloaked himself in a mantle of holy aura, twin blades of light forming in his hands. His swords met Frey's dark twin blades, holy and shadow clashing, each aura trying to devour the other. As the two dueled, Platini flashed in beside Fry and drove another lightning-quick punch, only for Snow Lionheart to parry it at the last heartbeat, forcing him back. I'm your opponent, Bishop. Lionheart. In seconds, the four were fighting at blistering speed, wreaking colossal destruction as the church's followers swarmed to encircle them. The clash between Fry and Bladier moved so fast that no one else could hope to intervene. One wielded two dark swords, the other swords of pure light. Every strike released a terrifying surge of aura as their blades met. Bladier, you damned old snake. I see you've hidden quite a lot up your sleeves. With a swift slash, Fry ripped a great swath from Bladier's robe, exposing his body. Etched across it were the same blood sigils his followers bore, carved deep into flesh. So that's the secret of your strength? Fry sneered, as Bladier tried to cover them. This power is beyond your comprehension, Fry Starlight. Beyond my comprehension? Do you truly believe borrowing scraps of power from your followers will let you defeat me? Bladier was an SS-class fighter, standing among the peak of human warriors. But that was nowhere near enough to face the Fry Starlight of today. Fry had pondered it for a long time. At last, the church's strange rites made sense. Those blood sigils are just catalysts for your sacrifice rituals. In exchange for your followers' souls, you gain things, angels, or enough power to fight above your rank. He didn't know how the church had gotten its hands on such a thing. But for each church follower who died, the bishops gained a measure of power in return. Fry had killed many of them already, and had, indirectly, funneled their strength to the man before him. Exploiting those sacrifices, the souls of thousands, Bladier had forced himself up to fight at a level comparable to SS+. Bladier said nothing. That silence told Fry he was right. I don't know if that power is permanent or temporary, but let's see how long you last, Bladier. Frey's body flared, power rising still higher. Despite his opponent's sudden surge, he did not seem troubled. In fact, he looked entertained. They hurled themselves at each other again, harder than before, determined to end this lopsided battle. Gaining strength through the sacrifice of others, a strange ritual had fallen into the hands of the church, one that made breaking into higher realms possible, even for someone like Bladier. His power had now surpassed the SS rank after being trapped there for so long. His light blazed so fiercely he felt as though nothing was beyond his reach. But his strength came at the cost of thousands of lives, every soul offered up for the sake of this so-called power. This was the grim path of sacrifice discovered by the church, the very foundation of their rise. In this vast world, countless paths to power exist. This one, perhaps, the darkest and most tragic of them all. Bladier was fast, relentless, radiant. I sacrificed thousands. I led them to ruin so I could grasp this strength. Boom! Explosions rippled one after another as the High Bishop of the church clashed against the monster called Fry Starlight. I've grown stronger, far stronger than I ever was. With every collision, every strike, old memories rose within Bladier. The days when he bowed his head, humbled himself before others, waiting for the day he would rise again to repay them in kind. And now that day had come. This was meant to be his hour of triumph, the moment when the world would finally see who Joseph Bladier truly was. The elder who led the church for generations. At least that was what it should have been. Boom! Before the stunned eyes of the church's followers, the explosions roared on. With this power, I should stand among the strongest in the world. Then why in the hell? His fists clenched until they bled, his body forced backward, his feet digging into the earth just to remain standing. Bladier stared in horror at the masked figure before him. I should be one of the strongest alive. Then why the hell can he still overwhelm me so easily? Boom! With a single vicious slash from those cursed black swords, Fry sent Bladier flying, pressing harder with each strike. Formation of blades of light. Gathering all his power, Bladier conjured dozens of radiant swords and hurled them at Fry in desperation. But Fry brushed them aside with ease, never relenting. 10,000 steps of shadow. Supreme art, abyssal wave. In less than a fraction of a second, Fry vanished, reappearing behind Bladier in the blink of an eye. The bishop's face turned ashen as his body was torn apart by hundreds of violet slashes that shredded him mercilessly. Bladier forced his sacred power to its limits, healing himself as quickly as he was being cut, clinging to survival by the thinnest thread. But Fry gave him no chance to breathe. Seems you're the one who doesn't know his place, Bladier. Slash! Bathed in the glow of shadow assimilation, Fry carved him apart again and again. At first, Bladier seemed able to hold his ground, but within moments, Fry had flipped the battlefield entirely to his favor. Damn you! Light formation! Bladier gathered his power for a new technique, only for time itself to freeze. The world fell silent as though even existence held its breath. Skill, screenshot. Fry had stopped time for a single second. A second was short, but for someone moving at Frey's speed, it was enough to accomplish plenty. Slash! In one swift strike, Fry tore open Bladier's chest, spilling entrails and organs onto the earth without mercy. Ah, you were about to unleash a technique of some sort? I'm sure it would have been pathetic anyway. Let's not waste either of our time. Boom! Another ruthless strike sent Bladier crashing across the battlefield. What were you even trying to achieve here? Did you really humble yourself for all those years, deceiving thousands of people, for this pitiful scrap of power? Tell me, Bladier. Frey's eyes brimmed with genuine contempt for his opponent. Bladier, bleeding profusely, finally understood the grave mistake he had made. Compared to the monster before him, his strength was nothing. Followers of the church, unite your strength against this demon! Bladier screamed in terror. His voice shook the faithful who rushed toward Fry. Whoever sacrifices their life here, heaven shall be their reward. Eternal bliss awaits. Do not hesitate. Attack him! He screamed, desperate, rallying them with promises no sane mind should believe. Fry laughed bitterly at the sight. Look at you. This is far beyond blind faith. This is sheer stupidity. Slash! Carving through the zealots like paper, Fry advanced on the fleeing Bladier who was now running for his life. If you are the righteous ones, if I'm the mistaken heretic here, then tell me, followers of the church. Slash! Why do you die so easily before me? And why does your noble leader flee from me? Slash! The angels opened fire. The warriors charged with their weapons, but it was useless. The battle was completely one-sided. I see what you're doing, Bladier, driving more of your followers to their graves so you can sacrifice them and swell your strength. You're truly desperate, old man. Frey's swords moved at a mad speed, leaving only exploding violet trails behind. Blood poured from the church's ranks without end as Frey tore through them with his full power. Bladier ran, leaving a line of blood in his wake. He tried to retreat. His followers hurled themselves in Frey's path to stop him, convinced they were serving their cause. Platini was locked in his own battle with Snow Lionheart. In other words, there was no one left to help Bladier. I still have a chance. The power of the World Tree is on my side. Clinging to his last hope, Bladier rushed toward the sacred tree, toward where Saint Uriel Platini lay. There lay his final chance. But everything around Bladier froze when he felt death closing in. "You're not going anywhere." He heard the voice clearly, a whisper beside his ear. Realizing how close Frey was, Bladier spun to defend. Boom! Bladier heard a sound, a strange sound, the sound of an explosion, as sticky things splattered to the ground. It was odd, until he found himself lying there amid those viscous chunks and the blood soaking everything. This is the end. With a single thrust, Frey drove Valyrian into Bladier's chest. The strike was colossal. Valyrian looked like a dark meteor from the sheer aura Frey poured into it. The blow obliterated Bladier's chest and neck, along with much of his stomach and shoulders. A monster strike, and the High Bishop crashed down, blood spreading everywhere. The sight was so horrifying that many of the surviving followers lost the very will that had kept them moving. The butcher of their leader stood there, face hidden behind a strange black mask. He turned toward them. Who's next? Simple words, but terror flooded their hearts. They all recoiled at once. Snow Lionheart was still battling Platini, whose power had swelled through sacrifice. And that, in particular, caught Frey's eye. So the bishops are the only ones benefiting from the power of the dead. Swords in hand, Frey prepared to rush over, help Snow, and cut down the second bishop as fast as possible. That was the plan. The plan he didn't carry out because something utterly unexpected happened. Turning slowly, Frey saw a sight he hadn't anticipated. His last strike had blown Bladier to pieces. His head flung one way, the rest of his body another. And yet, despite that, though he should have been dead, Bladier's right arm rose upright, as if life had never left it. On that arm burned a mass of incomprehensible blood sigils, cursed glyphs glowing with a baleful red light. Then the entire place shook, and a massive beam fell from the sky, swallowing Frey and driving him dozens of floors below. At the summit of the ancient Nocthera temple, the female war angel appeared again. The same angel Frey had avoided fighting last time, now ambushing him with an attack that came literally from nowhere. Meanwhile, Bladier's body flared with light, his scattered parts floating above the ground, until, before their very eyes, his limbs knit themselves back together. The old man regained his form, then collapsed, panting and drenched in sweat, fear carved into his face. He had just stared death in the eye, yet he lived. And for his followers, that was all they needed to see. A miracle! It's a miracle! The faithful cried one after another, while Bladier stared at them in bafflement. What are these fools even talking about? This was no miracle, it was the power he had borrowed from the Golden World Tree. The tree's power was so vast it breathed life into everything around it. Bladier had long tried to make that power his own, but it had always rejected him, granting him only scraps. Yet those scraps were enough to pull him back when death was already upon him. He hadn't intended it to happen now, but the result was the same. His followers were even more convinced, calling it a miracle. Normally, Bladier might have taken delight in such a sight, but this time he couldn't. That monster who had killed him before was coming, racing back to them like lightning. Followers of the Church, do not lose your faith. That monster is strong, but he's still just a human with a single heart. No matter how powerful he seems, he will die in the end. Devote your hearts and fight for the Lord of Light. Activating the blood runes, Bladier signaled for the angel to descend. The war angels will fight at our side. As he spoke, he triggered the runes on his other hand as well. The pressure in the air spiked as a second war angel appeared from afar. Stop him here. Whatever it takes, Bladier roared, and his followers answered as one. For the Lord of Light, they shouted with zeal, then snapped their mouths shut as a crushing aura rolled over them, greater by itself than anything the angels had shown. The pressure twisted Bladier's face with fear. He turned and bolted. You're testing my patience, Bladier. You and your damn flock, eager to worship the ass of a god you know nothing about but his name. Leaping from the crater where he'd been buried, Fry emerged unharmed, even after taking a direct hit from a war angel. This time I'll kill you properly, Fry said, anger low and cold. Fire! Bladier screamed. At his command, the second war angel fired its cannon of holy aura at Fry. Fry whirled to face it, an immense surge of power flooding from within him. 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry Starlight style. Nameless judgment. Unleashing nameless judgment at full power, his colossal slash met the angel's cannon head-on, split the great beam in two, and drove on, cleaving the war angel itself in half. At the same time, Fry lunged at the other war angel, his twin blades blazing with shadow aura. That second angel had finished charging and immediately fired its barrage straight at Fry. He dodged with teleportation, reappearing at a wholly different angle, but the angel snapped its head around and kept the beam trained on him, dragging a line of devastation toward him through the sky. Both of them soared. Exploiting his insane speed, Fry descended on the angel's back, raining down a torrent of slashes, only for a massive barrier to shield the angel's body. Elsewhere, a strange force began trying to reknit the war angel Fry had just bisected. Noticing it, fury tightened Frey's features. His aura flared even harsher as he pushed to erase both angels as fast as possible. The sight of a single youth battling two SS+ war angels, the very pinnacle of that rank, only poured more terror into Bladier, who fled. His retreat fell within Frey's perception. He saw it clearly. But he was locked with the angels. He would have to rely on his friend. Snow, chase that senile bastard. Don't let him run. At Frey's call, Snow Lionheart, who had utterly overpowered Platini, broke off to pursue. Despite Platini's swollen strength from sacrifices, Snow, who had opened the demonic path alongside the human path, was simply stronger. With Bladier fleeing, Platini tried to do the same, so Snow hunted them both. Count on me, Fry. Just focus on the enemy in front of you. Fry fought above, in the sky. Snow waged battle below. Their power far exceeded Bladier's expectations, leaving him no choice but to retreat and play every last card. Snow gave chase, and Platini snapped his hand out with a command. Followers of the church, stop him. At once, fighters and angels massed before Snow to bar his way. Snow's voice crashed over them in fury. Open your eyes. Am I not the bearer of the blade forged by that so-called god you worship? Why standing in my way? You may be the Lord of Light's messenger, but you defied his decree, Lord Lionheart. Fry Starlight deceived you and twisted you to his ends. Come back to your senses, Lord Lionheart. They cried out one after another, and Snow found himself speechless for a heartbeat. What is this? Are you serious? What cursed faith is this? Whoosh! Unleashing black lightning and blue flames, Snow carved his way through, abandoning any thought of persuading them. Fighting alone, the Empire's hero once again found himself cutting down his own kind without mercy. He looked into the faces of the church's followers. People who fought to their last breath believing they were right, blinded by a faith built on a lie. And understood then just how terrifying religion could be. More terrifying than anything else. Capable of washing the minds of millions with ease, woven into the very core of every human. Damn you all! Calling down elemental cataclysms, Snow burned them alive. Exploiting the distraction that pinned Snow down, Bladier and Platini fled back toward the sacred tree. Bladier, what are we going to do? Platini shouted. We use everything we have. Fry Starlight's strength exceeded our expectations by miles. That monster is far too dangerous, Bladier said, grimly resolute. We'll wield the tree's power, and the saint's life if we must. We'll sacrifice everything to win, Platini. Determined to play every last card, Bladier rushed back to the summit, and within minutes he arrived. But to his surprise, he was not the first to get there. Sitting there already was a third figure, who had slipped in uninvited. Ah, finally! You've no idea how long I've been waiting. Rising to his feet, he smiled the way he always did. A smile that sent a shiver through Bladier. You? How did you get here? The bishop blurted, while the newcomer's smile only widened. It was the prince. Aegon Valyrian. Aegon Valyrian, how in the hell did you get here? Bladier advanced warily with Platini beside him, toward the prince who had appeared from nowhere. That's a fair question, but you don't need the answer, Aegon said, turning his head toward the great tree rising behind him. What matters is that I'm here, at the very place you hid from the entire world. Joseph Bladier, I knew you were hiding plenty, and you haven't disappointed me. The hall they now stood in lay beneath the sacred tree, overlooking the spring where Saint Uriel lay. Aegon had already taken it all in. The prince was still admiring the place when Platini flashed in front of him without warning, driving a full-force punch. Platini's blow sent Aegon flying, detonating the surroundings. The bishop had aimed to finish the prince in one strike, and he had landed the hit, yet the outcome was not what he wanted. Platini stared, startled, at the sword marks across the arm he'd punched with, while Aegon laughed from afar. That was close. Out of the drifting dust, Aegon stepped forth with a sword in his right hand, dark serpents of lightning crawling over it. In his left he held a strange staff, radiating a golden glow that had shielded him at the last instant. That's the Dawn Guard, one of the ancient weapons lost since its previous bearer's death, apparently now in Aegon's possession. Kill him, Platini. We can't allow anyone who's seen this place to leave alive. Bladier slurred, swaying pitifully. His state was wretched after the fight with Fry Starlight. Staying conscious at all was a struggle. Platini had also lost to Snow, but he was in much better shape. Bladier, to be honest, I always thought more of you. I took you for a worthy foe. You hid your trump cards carefully and managed to deceive millions with this counterfeit religion you lead. But look at you now. Everything you built over all these years is crumbling before your eyes. Your trump cards, your mighty weapons you relied on to crush your enemies. None of it matters in front of real power. There are monsters in this world against whom plans and strategies are useless. Only power equal to or greater than theirs can overcome them. Aegon strode forward without fear toward the battered bishops. That's why you lost to Fry Starlight. He's the kind of monster whose strength can't be measured by human standards. In other words, ordinary schemes won't work on him. You've lost completely, Bladier, and it's honestly pathetic. Bladier's face twisted. I've lost? And who decides my defeat or victory? You, Aegon Valyrian. He bared both forearms. The blood sigils carved into his flesh shone a deep crimson. Fry Starlight is pinned between two war angels right now, and I'll be done with my preparations by the time Snow Lionheart gets here. As for you, pointing at Aegon, Bladier smiled, a terrible grin. You won't live to see tomorrow. We can end you here and now. As Bladier spoke, a fourth figure entered the hall. A man in his 40s, robed in white, black-haired, different from the other bishops. Ramiel Khaleesi, the last and youngest of the three bishops. Looks like I arrived just in time, Khaleesi said, fixing Aegon with a stare as a fierce green aura flooded his body. Like the others, he'd benefited from sacrificial power, his strength greatly enhanced, and unlike them, he hadn't fought yet, so he was still at full capacity. The battle had become 3 against 1, and the prince stood alone. You spoke arrogantly, Prince, daring to judge me from your paltry level. You spoke of power and plans, but you have little of the first, and that fabled cunning of yours has led you here alone like a fool. Perhaps you thought we couldn't fight after losing to your companions, that you could land an easy finishing blow. If that was your grand plan, then you're the pathetic one here, Prince. Eyes bloodshot, Bladier pushed himself forward. It's fine. We can win this. he told himself, glancing from the prince to the golden tree behind him. The war angels were fighting Fry. Snow was pinned and wouldn't arrive in time. All 3 bishops were present against Aegon. They would defeat him easily, and then there would be many ways to end the battle. We still have the saint, and the tree's remaining power. There were still plenty of chances. Defeat was nowhere near certain. Let's finish him quickly. We've wasted enough time, Blatier said firmly, taking point, Platini at his side, Khaleesi behind him. 3 fighters pushed to near or equal to the SS plus tier. Against Aegon, the prince had no chance to win. And yet, in answer to Blatier's earlier words, Aegon simply nodded with a smile. You're right, Blatier, we've wasted too much time. It's time to end this tired little play. Though completely surrounded, Aegon kept walking toward Blatier. Humans are opportunistic creatures, simple and complicated at once. Among them you'll find those twisted to the core, beyond any sense. Others live only for their own interests and ambitions. Some fight for family, for faith, for country. The concepts vary, but they share much in common. All of them are just aims and creeds people use to justify what they do. Waging war in the name of faith, killing others as heretics who deserve death. In the name of country, under the pretext of defending it from foreign invaders. In the name of family, under the pretext of protecting them. Or for something far simpler, for yourself, for your own selfishness. In the end, everyone stains their hands with blood for different reasons, but blood has only one color. And when the tale is over, we're all the same kind of killers, fighting for our own interests. Aegon kept talking, ignoring his current predicament entirely, making Blatier narrow his eyes at him. What in hell are you babbling about? Ah, forgive me. Aegon chuckled lightly, one hand settling on his hip as he pointed at Blatier with the other. What I'm trying to tell you, dear Blatier, is that humans are selective creatures who live for their own interests, which is precisely why it's not strange for them to switch sides when they're offered a better deal. Aegon's words rang slowly in Blatier's ears with a peculiar lilt the bishop did not understand at all. For at that exact moment, Blatier heard something break. The wet crunch and spill of something viscous onto the floor. His vision bled red, and the prince's smile stretched wider and wider, until Aegon's face in that instant looked positively demonic. A sadistic grin the likes of which Blatier had never seen, the grin of a twisted soul who savored moments like this. Blatier lowered his head by degrees, and at the same time Platini turned toward him in shock. Both of them stared at the bloody hand protruding through Blatier's back, jutting out of his chest. He didn't comprehend what had happened at first. Seconds later, he finally understood. He had been betrayed from behind, stabbed in the back by his own ally. Sorry, Blatier. Nothing personal. The prince simply made the better offer. From behind Blatier, Khaleesi spoke with a broad smile, just as Platini lunged at him. Khaleesi, what have you done? Platini attacked immediately, but too late. That split second of shock had dulled his senses, and Khaleesi exploited it, lifting his free hand toward Platini and unleashing a massive cannon of sacred aura. The beam swallowed Platini whole, driving him through wall after wall before detonating amid distant rubble. Unlike Blatier and Platini, Khaleesi was at full strength, and thus held the absolute advantage. He'd been precise too. His hand had punched straight through Blatier's heart. Blatier tried to muster something. Anything. But Khaleesi made his next move instantly, severing Blatier's left arm, the one carved all over with blood runes. Then, in a clean motion, he yanked his hand free of Blatier's back, snatched up the severed arm, and returned to Aegon's side. His work was surgical. Blatier toppled, unable even to form words. Blood filled his throat. Standing beside Khaleesi, Aegon looked down at the severed arm. Is this the key? He asked, and Khaleesi nodded. The runes on Blatier's forearms serve as the activation keys for the War Angels. With him weakened to this degree and his arm removed, he can't stop me from taking control any longer. Clutching the severed arm, Caliste poured out sacred power, triggering the blood runes etched into his own flesh as well. Since I carry power equal to Bladier's, since he's too weakened to resist, and since I possess the same lost runes, we meet all the conditions. From this moment, the war angels will obey me entirely. As he spoke, he destroyed Bladier's hand with a burst of power and drew the runic energy into himself. The blood sigils flared ominously, winding around Caliste's, who now stood as absolute master of those mighty angels. The war angels are at my command, and I am at yours, Aegon Valyrian. Bowing to the prince, Caliste displayed complete fealty. It was not loyalty bought overnight, but one forged long ago. Bladier couldn't speak, but questions stormed his mind. When? How? When had the prince turned Caliste's? And how? With a spy of Caliste's rank embedded among the church's leaders, it meant Aegon had known everything, all of their secrets. Caliste had been one of the bishops steering it all beside Bladier. In other words, Aegon had known the church's plans, had known they would betray the empire in this war. And yet he chose to stand aside and let the current carry events along, regardless of the losses suffered by the very empire he was meant to inherit, regardless of all those dead. Aegon had gambled all their lives for this moment. We're alike, Bladier. We played the same game. The difference is, you're just a hobbyist who found himself up against a player vastly above his level. Aegon laughed, and Caliste joined him. They both laughed at Bladier, the old man who thought he had the world in his grasp, never realizing the serpent had already coiled around his neck. The church won't end here. It will rise again, Aegon said, gesturing to Caliste's. Ramiel Caliste's will be the new high bishop, and given the method you used to manipulate that revelation tablet, it won't be hard to gather your flock beneath the banner of the Lord of Light's orders. It's truly absurd how ready your followers are to carry out anything that comes down to them, whether it's ordering them to kill themselves, violate their own families, or sacrifice each other. As long as it's labeled, the Lord of Light's will, they'll obey without hesitation. Isn't that marvelous? Isn't that sheer madness? Aegon's baleful laughter echoed through the great hall. Bladier's eyes slowly lost their light, a bitter expression frozen on his face. The golden world tree shuddered without cease, as if mourning the state humanity had fallen into. Aegon Valyrian had just laid his hand on a vast power. An entire faith, centuries old, was about to bend to his will. Winning Caliste's over to his side was a brutal blow to the church, but the timing of Aegon's strike was the real masterstroke. Delivered at the single most perfect moment, at the church's and Bladier's weakest hour. He used his allies. He used his enemies. He used everyone. At the end of the day, Aegon stood on the verge of being the only winner. From afar, Platini dragged himself back, seething with rage, while life fled Bladier's eyes. It seems they're breathing their last, Caliste said, stepping forward to finish them. He was satisfied. He had never felt any bond with Bladier or Platini. By siding with Aegon, he had secured the decisive power within the church, the highest office. True, he would serve Aegon, but the prince's side was the winning side he had chosen, the side that had given him everything he wanted. Between the dying Bladier, the broken Platini, and Aegon and Caliste savoring every moment, the battle against the church was entering its final act. Caliste was about to end Bladier when he halted, because a young man finally arrived, soaked in blood. What happened here? His eyes swept the chamber, trying to take it all in. Snow Lionheart, the hero who had just slaughtered a terrifying number of the church's followers, forced to stain his hands with their blood. You finally made it, Snow Lionheart. Aegon, I asked you a damned question. Answer it. Snow was furious and confused. He had not expected the prince to be here. We won, Snow. That's what happened, Aegon said with a smile, gesturing at their enemies. Bladier has fallen, and with him the entire church. He said it as if it were the simplest thing in the world, so simple Snow couldn't even form words. He didn't fully grasp what had happened, but seeing Caliste standing with Aegon was enough to make many things clear. At the end of the day, it felt as though everyone had lost. And the only winner was Aegon Valyrian. Was this even a war? Could it even be called a battle? No. Felt like a play. A stage drama in which everyone had performed their parts. Him, Fry, the Empire, the Ultras, the Church. All of them acting out the show Aegon had prepared for them. Not far from where they stood, Fry appeared as well out of thin air. The angels he'd been fighting had vanished in some strange way. Fry glanced over the situation. Then his eyes drifted to the spring nearby, where a familiar girl he had been searching for lay. She was completely naked, pierced by dozens of blood-filled tubes, a lattice of crimson runes carved across her skin. Uriel. I wouldn't get close, Fry Starlight. Touch her before she finishes receiving the inheritance, and she'll die. Khaleesi warned, ready to say more, but fell silent the moment his eyes met Frey's. The killing intent pouring off Frey's body made the bishop break into a sweat. Aegon spoke in his place. The church's elites depend on the rites of sacrifice. The saint is no exception. The Lord of Light abandoned them long ago. This was the only way to preserve their legacy. One saint after another. Passing it on through sacrifice, then transferring blood and power to the loyal successor. They've done this for years to maintain the saint's purity and strength, but the process puts a crushing strain on human bodies. That's why they don't live past their 20s. And that was why Saint Eurasia had withered into an old crone the moment she was offered up. Their bodies burn through all their life force just to withstand the power forced into them, and some of them can't even wield it properly. Their leaders grow stronger by sacrificing others, and their religion rests on a lie. That is the church that captured the hearts of millions, Aegon said, eyes lifting to the golden tree. The world tree, the only thing that had exceeded his expectations and seized his full attention. Then he looked back to Fry standing before him. By all rights, they had already won. Their enemy had been defeated. But for some reason, no one moved. The killing intent refused to fade, and it was clear neither Fry nor Snow would leave without spilling someone's blood. But whose? Between Aegon and Khaleesi, Fry and Snow, the dying Bladier, and Platini kneeling on the floor, Uriel lying amid her own blood. Silence fell. A silence that preceded the catastrophe whose consequences the world would suffer for many, many years to come. At the summit of the city of eternal night Nocthera, in the oldest temple of all, where the golden world tree rose, the battle against the church had reached its final turns. 3 youths, not yet 20, had managed to topple an order with countless followers that had endured for centuries. In the face of those 3, everything seemed poised to end swiftly, especially after Aegon Valyrian dealt the finishing stroke himself, drawing one of the bishops to his side. Though the fight looked over, the air said otherwise. Aegon stepped back a pace while Khaleesi stood before him. Bladier still lay on the ground, a gaping crater in his chest and a severed hand. His control over the war angels gone. In other words, he had lost every weapon he possessed. Platini, too, was of no use. He had been soundly beaten by Snow Lionheart. As for Snow, he sided with Fry Starlight. Silence pressed in. The sharpest tension in the room came from Fry himself, his face hidden behind that mask. There was no way to know what moved in his mind, or what his next step would be. The Empire's side was supposed to have won. But that was not the truth. The only winner today was Aegon, and no one else. Left as things were, he would lay claim to the entire church and gain even more power, enough not only to sit the Empire's throne, but to stand astride the world. Absorb the church, then crush the Ultras. At this rate, it would not be strange to see that young man at the peak of the world before long. Neither Fry nor Snow looked the least bit satisfied with that outcome, and blood could spill at any moment. In that heavy air, Platini crawled, inch by inch trying to reach Bladier. Master Bladier! Staring at the man he had followed all his life, Platini's face twisted with pain as he watched everything they had built collapse before their eyes. The shock was great for him and greater still for Bladier. Eyes bloodshot, Bladier stared at the floor beneath him, straining to keep himself alive. His breaths came ragged. Blood pooled and spread across the stone, proof that his efforts were already failing. Before him, a clash could erupt at any second among his enemies, over the church and its future. Would it end under Aegon's control, or be erased entirely by Fry? Either way, the battle no longer included him. He had lost, completely and easily. His enemies gave him no heed. He was nothing now but a pitiful loser, unable to accomplish a thing. The church I safeguarded all these years, the one I built until it became what it is. With blood-filled eyes, Bladier dragged himself forward. In those eyes flickered scene after scene, the storms that had battered him through the years. Rises and falls, victories and defeats. He had bowed his head countless times, swallowed humiliation again and again to pursue his ends. He had lived his entire life inside the church. My church, this is my church, Bladier forced out, spitting blood. He had schemed and lied to make it what it was, killed and sacrificed thousands, endured degradation and defeat dozens of times. He had poured out his life here, and now he watched it being taken from his hands with ease. I knew the Lord of Light abandoned us long ago. I know that. I know the Lord of Light is no God. Decades ago, the young Bishop Joseph Bladier rose, becoming the youngest in history. Back then he was a bright youth, overflowing with faith. He believed in the cause. He believed in the Lord of Light. He was devout to the core, dedicating life and body to the faith. But with the bishop's seat came truth, the knowledge few possessed. The church was not the noble body people imagined. It was a religion built on a lie, a great lie. The Lord of Light had never even acknowledged their existence. All that mattered to him was his chosen champion, and nothing else. That realization shocked Bladier, and the shock deepened as he uncovered further secrets. True, the Lord of Light did not own them, but he had left things upon the earth, things that helped make them what they were. He left a great tree that bore a mysterious power, enough to fill an entire island with life. From that tree came the sacred sword Vermithor. Alongside it, the Lord of Light left strange runes, meaningless scrawls no one understood. After long and exhaustive study, over many years, the church discovered those runes were tied to sacrifice. The path of sacrifices. Etching those cursed letters would allow the awakened to grow stronger as the number of those who died for them increased. But absolute faith was required to trigger the path. The one sacrificed had to believe wholly in the person for whom they offered their life. If the conditions were met, one could obtain a power great enough to break one's limits. The very power Bladier had relied upon and wagered everything on. The church was built on a lie, and the rope of lies is short. The day truth exploded and everything collapsed was fated to come. But Bladier held the line. He kept this edifice standing right up to the end. It was said that the first saint who had marched with Casus Valerian in the ancient war also possessed a certain connection to the Lord of Light. But she, too, vanished long ago. To preserve her legacy, the church tried to pass down her blood and power through candidate after candidate, hoping another saint of equal stature would appear. All their attempts failed. Not a single saintess has broken past SS+, and every one of them dies young, unable to bear the alien power forced into their bodies. The church that tortured so many, the church built on blood and sacrifice, on lies and slander. It was rotten to the core. And yet, in the end, Bladier succeeded in keeping it alive. He delved into that filth and with his own hands committed enough sins to drown himself, until he, too, became rotten to the core. He wanted his church to reign. He wanted the lie he once believed to harden into a truth the whole world would accept. To achieve that, he went too far, far beyond any return. He had sacrificed so much, and now he was losing everything. So easily. So simply. Aegon Valerian, Fry Starlight. They were taking it from him, stealing it right out of his hands. Bladier clenched his teeth until they creaked, weeping blood while a furnace of feeling burned inside him. Boundless rage, a madness that swallowed his exhausted mind. The pain was great, but the fire that scorched him from within was greater. Without warning, Bladier began to scream wild, unhinged screams that swung every gaze back to him. He tried to speak, but coughed up nothing but the blood filling his throat. Fry, Aegon, even Snow and Khaleesi, all of them stared with eyes that held a dozen kinds of judgment. Contempt, hatred, pity, scorn. Bladier no longer cared what his enemies thought. Under the weight crushing him, with everything collapsing, facing the loss of all he'd clung to, he snapped completely. Mouth gaping to its limit, Bladier bit into his remaining arm with everything he had. His teeth sank deep. A horrific wound flowered where he tore the flesh. Ea warg. Arg. Once wasn't enough. He ripped and gnawed, chewing through meat and bone until his own face was lacquered in his blood. He did not stop until he bit clean through his last arm, a feral spectacle that froze everyone where they stood. Bladier clamped the severed hand between his teeth, breathing in ragged, ghastly groans no one would have believed came from a human throat. Slowly, he raised his head toward the heavens, lifting that hand high in his blood-slicked jaws. He was a ruin, limbs gone, chest gouged open, drenched in red, but his eyes held a terrifying resolve that proved the High Bishop had not yet fallen. The instant he raised that hand aloft, it flared with an ominous crimson light. Blood runes ignited out of nowhere, and everyone understood the dying bishop was about to do something. 3 figures detonated the floor and rushed him at once. Fry, Snow, and Khaleesi. All 3 appeared before him and struck with brutal force. Slash! A storm of blood burst across the chamber as steel carved flesh. But the flesh was not Bladier's. A man had hurled himself into the path at the last instant, shielding him with his body. Fry, Snow, Khaleesi, all 3 halted, startled by Platini, who had leapt in front of Bladier and given them his back. The blow was overwhelming. Platini had no chance to survive, yet he bought Bladier a few scant seconds. Seconds enough to act. Bladier, I have followed you always. I have been with you longer than anyone. When Bladier climbed to the seat of High Bishop, Platini had ever been the right hand at his side. This place was crooked and dark from the start, but you kept this edifice standing. You built it. Without you, there is no church. Those were the words Platini wished to say. They never left his mouth. Their blades did not spare him, and life fled his eyes at once. But before he died, he entrusted everything to the High Bishop he had always respected. I offer up this paltry life for you. I bequeath my dream and my strength to you, my lord. It doesn't matter how this day ends, whether the church is erased or endures, but let them know fear. Show them the true terror of the institution for which we lived, and for which we now die. Platini was gone. His body fell, but his very being poured into Bladier, another sacrifice to fuel his master's mad ambition. This church is a part of me. If I live, it lives with me, and if I die, it dies with me. Bladier roared, dragging the words up from his gut, from the bottom of his soul. One last time. Let me use it. Once more. The hand clamped in Bladier's teeth detonated, and the stage was set. At that same moment, far from them, a certain pair of eyes opened at last. Within the spring where she had lain in her own blood, Uriel Platini awoke and opened her eyes. Eyes once blue, now shining with a baleful golden glow. Rising to her feet, her naked body still laced with dozens of blood-filled tubes, Uriel lifted her hand toward Bladier, and an uncanny aura gathered from nothing, bending to her will. Uriel. What? Fry breathed, stunned by the weight of the aura he felt. Uriel Platini had laid her hand upon a vast power, an aura drawn from the Golden World tree shuddering above them. In that instant everyone braced to fight, assuming that force was about to flow into Bladier. Because of that, Fry moved first at full speed. With all his strength he struck at Bladier's neck, taking his head cleanly before the old man could act. Bladier's head tumbled across the blood-wet floor. It looked as if Fry had stopped him, but the scenario they all imagined had been wrong from the start. That power had never been meant for Bladier. With a flick of her wrist, Uriel shaped the aura into a beam of blinding, immaculate white. It shot skyward, streaking away to a completely different place. Uriel herself wasn't conscious. She moved like a machine now. Her actions were strange. No one understood what she'd done. What was that light? Where had she sent it? No one knew, but the way Ramiel Kalis's face went dark made it clear the result was catastrophic. Quickly! Kill the saint now! Kalis flashed forward like lightning, striking for Uriel. His hand was inches from her when Snow cut in, severing that hand before it could touch her. What in hell do you think you're doing? Kalis roared, as Snow planted himself between him and Uriel. That's my question, Bishop. You'd murder this girl after torturing her for years. Fool! You have no idea how grave a mistake you've just made. Kalis shouted on, panicked, trying to push past. Snow barred him completely. Behind Snow, Uriel drifted slowly into the air as the sacred tree poured out a pure radiance that wrapped and shielded her. Seeing it, Kalis wore a tragic look. It's too late. Hearing that, Snow slammed him to the floor. Too late for what? Speak. What's happening? For that light? Kalis laughed bitterly, eyes fixed on the saint. It was the light of revelation. The light of revelation? At his words, everyone felt a peculiar tremor, like a distant earthquake rumbling somewhere far below. Fry and Aegon in particular stared in the same direction, grasping part of what was happening. That tremendous light had plunged downward at impossible speed, until it struck a certain place. The Oracle Tablet. The slab the church had used for ages to receive the Lord of Light's commands flared anew with fresh decrees. Angels wheeled around the tablet, their eyes blazing as they scanned the lines inscribed upon it. And in that same moment all across the world, especially throughout the Empire, angels took to the air. Their eyes lit, and from those eyes bloomed two-dimensional projections displaying the tablet, shining with those orders. We've seized control of the Angels of War, Kalis said, unleashing a wash of green light to tear free from Snow. But the other angels were still under Bladier and Platini's control. Now, nothing can stop what's coming. Snow watched Kalis flee, bewildered. He sprang toward Uriel, trying to reach her, but a wave of golden force threw him back. As Kalis had said, there was no longer any way to halt it. In that very instant, people everywhere lifted their eyes to the sky, staring at the tablet's image. Uriel opened her mouth to speak, and her voice came out of the mouths of every angel at once, amplified to the world. O faithful of the Church, noble souls who give yourselves for what is right. The demons and the darkness have massed at our gates, threatening all that we hold dear, but their fate is sealed. They will fall before the power of true believers. The Lord of Light has not abandoned us. Behold, he now sends down his blessed words, the command that will lead us to salvation. The Lord of Light commands you, pray, my righteous servants, pray. Etch these words upon your own skin, upon the skin of your loved ones, your children, and their children too. Pray and consecrate your faith. These few words will bring you deliverance and end your suffering. The saint cried out, and the angels cried out with her, broadcasting those strange scrawls to the entire world. Symbols none could read, none could comprehend. And yet, across the world, in the same heartbeat, the Church's followers moved as one, answering the call of the being they revered as their God. The Lord of Light. The Lord of Light will protect us. All who carved those words into their flesh would be shielded by the God. That was the message the revelation laid before them. They did not understand it, but the name of the Lord of Light alone was enough. Millions of the Church's faithful took up knives, any sharp edge at hand, and began engraving those words into their own skin. At the same time, Fry and Snow lunged together to stop Uriel, but the tree's power flung them back. It was a might so vast that even Fry couldn't pierce it. That force wrapped Uriel completely, and Fry realized he would have to strike to kill if he wanted to break through something like that. But even he couldn't bring himself to kill Uriel. That single hesitation let the rite complete. And that was the beginning of the catastrophe. Across the world, the Church's faithful carved those letters like mad, into their own skin, the skin of their children, their loved ones, their families. Cursed words were now etched onto the bodies of millions, millions of innocent souls who had followed the Lord of Light in sincerity. Once they carved them, they prayed. They prayed as their Lord had commanded. They prayed for themselves, for deliverance, for the protection they'd been promised. In answer to their prayers, the sigils on their bodies began to glow, and joy washed over them. But it lasted only a few heartbeats. The moment the rite ended, one man collapsed dead in a strange, inexplicable way. Then a second, a third, a fourth. People began dropping one after another as blood poured from their eyes and mouths. A sudden, sweeping die-off tore through terrifying numbers of lives, victims of their own faith. And that was only the first tremor of the chaos sweeping the world, as fear and death spread everywhere. The strength of a religion isn't in how mighty its adherents are, but in how many. Most who belonged to the church were ordinary folk who lived quietly. They had no place among the great noble houses or the powerful guilds. So they chose the faith they believed was right. For that reason, the dead in those moments numbered, in the millions. In mere minutes, more died than in the entire war to date. Panic gripped the world as people screamed, watching each other perish one after another. All of them were sacrificed by a demonic rite that burned away their life force, offered up to someone else entirely. Before the stunned eyes of Fry, Snow, and even Aegon, they witnessed a spectacle. Thousands, no, millions of lights streaking from afar toward this very place. That night, orders from the Lord of Light drove 35 million people to offer themselves, unaware of what they were doing. 35 million souls. 35 million sacrifices. All that power flowed to a single point. Millions of lights tore the sky and fell like meteors onto the body of the man who had died minutes earlier. The man who had given his entire life to this twisted religion. Joseph Blatier, the High Bishop. If I live, the church lives with me. If I die, it dies with me. Those were his words, and he carried them out to the letter. All those sacrifices, that vast power, were now in the hands of one man. Light swallowed Blatier's body for long minutes while everyone present froze beneath the crushing weight of the aura. The head Fry had lopped off earlier evaporated completely. Blatier no longer needed it. From within that column of radiance, a different being stepped forth. Is that Blatier? Snow whispered, unable to take in what he saw. What emerged was something grotesquely transformed. A body of pure white, laced with hundreds of golden and blood-red sigils in equal measure, all hidden beneath a colossal suit of golden armor. His face was sealed behind a golden helm. A massive spear in hand, he set his first step out of the light, and a tyrannical pressure slammed into the onlookers, forcing them to stand only by will alone as the power demanded they kneel. This pressure, this power, Khalees stammered, lips trembling. Such is the yield of millions of lives sacrificed at once. Joseph Blatier, aspect, Tower of God. Blatier had kept his vow. The church would live through him or die with him. That body had become the vessel for those countless souls that burned and perished. The explosive power born from it was enough to place Blatier at the pinnacle of humanity. Assuming he could still be called human at all. A calamity has befallen us, Aegon said, a crooked smile edging onto his face. The tide of battle flipped in an instant. The whole world bled with Blatier, the man who alone had become the cause of millions of deaths. His appearance made one thing clear. The real battle was only now beginning. Everything before had been child's play. The condition was fulfilled, the revelation descended, and the sacrifices were made. In the war of darkness, on that starless night, the world witnessed a calamity. A catastrophe that claimed millions of innocent souls. Poor souls whose only crime was their naivete, their folly in following that so-called God, the Lord of Light. Believing those accursed words were a revelation from him, they hurried to carve them into their own skin, and into the skin of their sons and daughters. They thought that by doing so they would secure the protection of the God they revered, that the Lord of Light would grant them the radiance to survive the war of darkness. They did not know their fate was nothing but the black of endless death, a darkness with no escape. In mere minutes, millions of bodies hit the ground uncounted and unmeasured. They died, every last one of them. Their faith killed them. Their ignorance killed them. And thus the calamity began. The world rang with screams and wailing. Humanity had never witnessed an extermination on such a scale. Not even the war had reaped so many. 35 million humans perished. 35 million lives offered up. What followed was breathtaking and terrible. Millions of stolen souls flared with pure light, then rose into the sky. They ascended in unison, like meteors from the void, racing as one toward a single destination. Noctura, the city of eternal night. The city blazed as every spirit fell to a single point. They streamed into the corpse of the man who should already have met his end, yet rose anew. In a different guise, a heavenly aspect that froze every witness where they stood, while a crushing pressure bore down on them. The weight of 35 million souls stacked one atop another for a single purpose, to serve a single man. Joseph Blatier, aspect, Tower of God. He had changed utterly, scarcely human by any measure. Whether he was even still a man was now in doubt. Clad in a colossal golden cuirass, his face buried behind a helm, no feature could be discerned. A titanic spear in his right hand, a vast shield in his left, he strode from the pillar of light with a white mantle of aura trailing behind. It was power from another world. I am the church, and the church is me. Blatier spoke from behind the golden helm. His voice had changed, deep and resonant enough to roll across the entire island. He had not been exaggerating before. It was no overstatement to say Blatier now bore the whole church within himself, attaining the summit of that cursed path of sacrifice. Uriel Platini, the saint who had moved almost mechanically until now, collapsed from the sky once her task was done, after transmitting the revelation Blatier wanted. Snow Lionheart rushed to catch her, while Fry stood before him, eyes wide on the figure that was Blatier. Aegon did the same. Fear showed plainly on Ramiel Callistus's face. This pressure, this aura, Aegon said, and Fry Starlight confirmed, this far surpasses SS+. Blatier has shattered the threshold and done the impossible. They all suspected as much. Now suspicion became fact. Joseph Blatier, the old bishop who had bowed his head again and again, who had lost so often he had forgotten the taste of victory, had finally climbed to that legendary height spoken of only in tales, the SSS rank. The first human to stand there since Abraham Starlight, whose ascent the world never knew. To the eyes of humankind today, Joseph Blatier was the first in centuries, since those ancient heroes. Blatier took a single step, and with it the pressure multiplied many times over, forcing everyone but Fry down to one knee. The Lord of Light abandoned us long ago, leaving us to live by a lie of our own making. We endured and endured, now comes the change. The Lord of Light has abandoned us, and no faith can stand without its God. So here and now, I will become that God, Blatier declared, spreading both arms wide. I shall become the new Lord of Light. His proclamation rolled like thunder as he drove even more pressure onto Fry and the rest. I will unite mankind under one banner, no more division, no more wars. From this day all will fight for one being. And to achieve that, many must die, beginning with you, enemies of the church. Spear in hand, Blatier declared war on everyone present, claiming he would replace the God who had forsaken them. He's gone completely mad, Fry said, stamping the ground until his foot sank deep. As he did, he unleashed his full aura to clash with Blatier's. Though the bishop had ascended to SSS, Fry Starlight met his pressure head-on, drawing Blatier's full attention to him. Snow, take Uriel and get out. Now, Fry said, drawing his blades. But Snow moved to object at once. I'm fighting too. You don't have the strength. His first blow will kill you. Frey's voice was iron. That bastard made SSS. He did it by twisted means, so I don't know if the power will last. But right now he's SSS, beyond doubt. Balerion in one hand and Dark Sister in the other, Fry Starlight sharpened every ounce of his strength. He's probably not used to this power yet. That's my only window. Facing Joseph Blatier, Frey's thoughts raced. He swept his gaze over Aegon, Snow, Callistus, everyone. No matter how he looked at them, all he saw were liabilities. None of them had the strength to withstand what was about to happen. Blatier has broken into SSS, but he's barely stepped into its first stage, the throne beyond existence. In other words, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that Joseph Blatier was currently the weakest SSS rank combatant in the entire world. Even so, merely breaching that rank brought a terrifying leap in power. The gulf between SS Plus and SSS is vast. An entire world lies between them, a world that has shattered the dreams of countless gifted warriors. There is an absolute law in this world, a law no one has ever broken. You cannot defeat an SSS rank fighter except with another SSS. Frey knew that law perfectly well, an absolute even he could not overturn. But what choice did he have? Everywhere he looked, before him and behind him, he found only a bitter reminder that, in this world, power is all that matters. I can fight for the Empire and save it again and again, as many times as it takes. But when a monster like this appears, I find myself on my own. His only ally in battles like this was nothing but his own strength. Frey considered retreat, fleeing far away. But if he left Blatier to grow accustomed to that power and return later, it would be a catastrophe, one they could not afford, which left only one option: fight. Snow Lionheart refused to withdraw to the very end, intent on joining the battle no matter the gap in power. But Frey sent a massive wave of aura crashing into him and hurled him away. Go! Now! In the same instant, Frey surged forward like a blazing black meteor and collided with Blatier, who charged to meet him. Blatier's spear of light clashed with Frey's shadowed blades, their impact unleashing an earthquake of aura. A terrifying shockwave obliterated the surroundings and flung everyone else through the air. The temple collapsed from a single clash. Only the golden tree remained standing. Shadow aura poured from Frey in torrents as he desperately tried to push back that overwhelming light forged from 35 million souls. At first, Frey held, gritting his teeth against the pressure. But within seconds the light completely overwhelmed the dark, and Frey was sent flying, both arms shattering. The blow hurled him an absurd distance. He crashed through the far forest and its trees, far from where they'd begun. He sent me this far. With one strike? Staring at his ruined arms, Frey finally reintroduced himself to it, the power that had haunted his nightmares. The might of those in the SSS rank.